How you doing, sir? I'm joined by Mr. Paul Riedl of Blood Incantation, and I'm so thankful that you were able to hop on and have a little conversation with me.
Got it. It's Riedl.
Riedl, I'm sorry, Riedl. My apologies to you. Uh, I, I even have so many people butchering my name these days, and so I apologize for that.
It happens every day.
Yeah. Uh, man, to say that Blood Incantation is a huge influence on me would be a real understatement. Because I know that, I mean, y'all make no secret about it that you guys take the heaviness and and everything y'all do um, with heavy influence leaning on like the likes of Morbid Angel and Gore Guts and so on and so on.
Oh yeah.
And and that's another band that I really those bands are really in my own caveman ways try to emulate. Uh,
Oh yeah. I mean, they're the best. We try to combine those two. We call it Gorbid Angel Guts.
Corbin Angel Guts.
We have a lot of Gorbid Angel Guts types of riffs that we'll call it. Like on the whiteboard, it'll say Gorbid Angel Guts. So
Yeah, but I really wanted to do this podcast with you because the lyrical content and the aesthetics of Blood Incantation. I mean, I take that it's beyond interesting because you tackle subjects that a lot of people in death metal don't, and I think that's what makes I know that's what makes your band so unique in nature. And I'll just would love to hear your story from whenever you were a kid, uh, coming up. What was life like in Oregon? Uh, because Dallas, our mutual friend, he actually broke that news to me that you actually started out in Oregon with Leech and
way
and
back.
then and so forward.
Yeah. I mean, I I was actually born in Salem, Oregon, where I lived for 4 years until I moved to Twin Falls, Idaho, an even smaller town where I lived for 11 years until moving back to Salem in 2002. So I am from Oregon, but I actually came of age more or less and got into alternative culture like punk music and skateboarding and stuff like that as living in Idaho, which was an even more isolating and it's like a desert culturally and spiritually and musically and all these things out there. No record store in town, no nothing like that. But I was always interested in old timey, mystical, old world stuff. My family had a lot of media around the house, a habit I have inherited, and a lot of records and books and movies. And my dad had a penchant for things like paleontology and natural history, anthropology and stuff, which expounds your expounds upon your perspective in the place of human history, which is something I always was really motivated by. And anything that kind of puts me in my place in that perspective, I really like, such as megalithic ancient structures, old growth forests, the solar system, anything which really focuses down on the liminal nature of the human experience juxtaposed to the macrocosm of this shared world or realm we're all in. And that's kind of been my only real interest in life beyond art and music and making music and stuff my whole life. And so when I was a kid, school subjects that have to do with those types of things I excelled in, and things which weren't even related to them I just wasn't bothering with at all. Similar with music and art, when you get into stuff as a 15-year-old, you're like, oh, this is like a dead body, that's cool. Or, oh, this is like a ghost or something, a skeleton, that's cool. But pretty quickly, it's almost demotivating how saturating it is to just gore for gore's sake or violence for violence sake and things like that. And but I've never really been motivated to espouse and preach a violent mindset or lifestyle. I've been vegetarian since I was 15. Over 20 years. Uh, been vegan for 10 years, but don't get it wrong. I hate vegans, but it's about this nonviolence. It's about anti-war, anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, anti-racism, all these things which are super, like, if it was cool to the church in the medieval era, this is a terrible thing that we need to banish from human consciousness, right? And so, in the same sense of, the expansion of civilizations into the natural world, or the subjugation of the natural world, I should say, into just relegating for product and things like that, and the expansion of business, this is terrible. And so I've always been really motivated by art and history, which lends itself into the greater perspective of the human, holistic integration of the human with the natural, and not to remove ourselves from it. So art about forests, like Leach was completely anarcho-primitivist, obsessed, like Luddite, Edward Abbey, Monkey Wrench Gang. Let's like take civilization down, starting from the factories, and just break it back down to hunter-gatherer stuff. Obviously, I'm not cut out for that lifestyle, but we were very young and naive and very excited. But this kind of naturalistic way of life, which manifests in extreme metal all over the place, paganism and this ancient world, is a huge aesthetic factor for many factors of, Viking metal, pagan metal, folk metal, all these things. And I've always been interested in stuff like that too. I have a lot of records like that on the shelf because history is interesting, and the more interesting thing is how little we know. The further we go into it, we're like, wow, we thought it was maybe this reason or that, and then it turns out you dig a little deeper, it becomes something even older buried underneath that foundation. And life is like that, art is like that. And so I've always been really motivated to just keep digging. And that's why, for instance, underground metal, underground music in general, extreme music, not just brutal music, but stuff like experimental progressive rock, private press, private issue new age records, obscure krautrock and stuff that's like,
Hmm.
those are as bountiful as the wells of underground tape trading were 20, 30 years beforehand. And especially at a time in the, early 70s, before a couple, during the oil boom, before these international embargoes on certain areas of the world, where it made vinyl, you could print 10,000 records for $2,000 in 1973. So a record label could afford to press several thousand records of something that had no commercial viability, which is directly why you had this extremely experimental, progressive mentality for so many genres. You got punk out of this time period, transitions into hardcore, crust, grind, death metal. It all comes going further and further. And you get a mirror of this in the 90s, where labels were supportive of this experimentation, from bands transitioning from thrash to death metal, from death metal to black metal, from black metal to cyber, techno, industrial, strange, all this stuff. There's always been that undercurrent of how deep can you get in the underground, and also how far can you take it in the art sense, how far can you take it into the mainstream consciousness. And like I said, that's basically been my only real interest in life, is trying to figure out stuff that either helps me to know my place in that maelstrom,
Hmm.
or help me get through it by way of archiving my own journey via records. Because records are records. That's literally why they're called that. It's a record of a time and place, of the people, the environment, everything. And I'm totally fascinated by that. Humans themselves are records of their parents and of their upbringing, nature versus nurture, all these things, books, archives, manuscripts, tablets, ancient temples. These are all records. So
Right.
records, I love these things. And so I just want to make good ones. I want to leave cool ones that, so when somebody is like myself, 25 years ago in a small town, 30 years ago in a tiny town, and there's no record store, and maybe one album cover in the back of a magazine has a compelling title or something, and you're like, what is that? You have to go to really great lengths to get it. You have to order and wait for months to get it in the mail. No internet. you know if you could leave a good artifact for somebody to discover, which sends them down the path in life that can be, a bountiful creative outlet for them in the future, that's good karma. If you leave, like, the only reason that any bands are any good is because they're all listening to good bands, and people, you can tell when bands are listening to bad records because they make bad music. And so I've always been motivated to leave the best artifact that I can, because when I would find something like that as a kid, it would directly inspire me to be like, oh, actually, i shouldn't be I shouldn't be focusing on this aspect of it. I gotta let that go, and I'll focus on this, like, little smaller part of it. And you get deeper and deeper and down, and that's how people go from watch an escape video that has like, I think one of the most important skate videos I ever saw in the '90s had like Pink Floyd, Time, Slayer, Rain and Blood. They were filming Black Sabbath playing with a hi eight from outside of a natural amphitheater. They were filming over the
I believe I
crowd.
know which video you're talking about because I was
Yeah,
a skater myself.
yeah, and stuff like that. There was DJ Shadow in there. There's a bunch of really
Yeah.
interesting stuff, and so that type of stuff. I was like, okay, this is like alternative music, and this is cool. And then as soon as you find out what those bands are, you look at the shirts they're wearing, the bands that they tour with on the posters, the shirts, like the patches they had, and they just keep going down and down. And so, I feel like I've been very fortunate to get some really good hits and find some really powerful totems, which send me on the right path towards my destiny. But also, I feel as artists, we're actually obligated to do our best to leave such artifacts for people, because the best record that you've ever heard has not been recorded yet. And so you have to find it. Hopefully, your life will sync up with it at some point in some timeline. You'll get to hear this record, and that record might inspire you to change your entire life, and maybe because of that, you go write the next best record that's ever been made. Still yet to be done, and then it just keeps going on. The next, the best death metal album ever made. The person who wrote it is probably not even born yet. It's the continuum is omnipresent and ever changing, and so we have just a short time in the grand scheme of things to participate.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
I'm sorry.
misspoke. I would like to clarify. I don't mean to participate, because that's a very casual association, but I mean to contribute in an earnest and meaningful way to this continuum. Is the impetus and modus operandi of my entire life. But I want people to do the best that they can, and I'm only doing the best that I can. It changes every day. Some days I'll write a better riff than the others. I try to be scrutinizing about it, but it's just only in the past few years actually have I even realized that I can make music that's not just for my ears, which has been, my main. I just want to make music because I'm looking for a riff that combines this plus that, and maybe I can. One record has an aspect of that, and this other record they go to it for just a bit, but I want it to go side by side. So I
Mhm.
just I just will make it. But the last 5 years or so, I've been a lot more cognizant of my responsibility as an artist to communicate directly with persons. And this actually will tie into your first query about the lyrics and the aesthetic and stuff like that. But I've only recently become aware of that responsibility. And in Blood Incantation, in the context of what we're trying to do, we talk about it a lot, where this responsibility is really important. Not just the riff quality, not just the aesthetics, but the what is this music telling people? What are you reading these lyrics and thinking about afterwards? And we have a responsibility to try to cultivate a meaningful place for people to do that, and information for them to do that with. And on the side of that, Blood Incantation is technically, I suppose, still our egotistical folly, because we just want to make music that we like to listen to, and we want to hear music that's compelling, and we want to play it that's satisfying for us in a way that's arranged in a certain way. But it is also trying to help, and to be there for people. And on my personal music stuff, I do a lot of ambient and acoustic solo music, instrumental stuff, where the last 5 years, I've really been trying to make music specifically dedicated to induce a meditative state of mind in the listener, to bring a sense of inner peace, or to instill a piece of a state of peace in this person. Because I'm an insane person, and I believe that each small act of kindness gradually helps the world. And if one person can chill out in traffic because they're listening to a ambient tape that I made, and then it prevents another timeline occurring where they got into road rage incident, that's worth it for me to make something peaceful. And in the extreme metal context, BI is extremely brutal, and we're trying our best to play quite technical and intense music. But there is a latent meditative quality inside the music. Like if you get into the zone, it kind of will take you there, right? And the lyrics for Absolute Elsewhere, at least, was the first time that we really tried to be like, I'm writing directly to the listener, trying to make a direct psychic connection between what I'm trying to say and what they're reading as they listen to and read the lyrics. And I had never done that before. But like I said, I've only been really self-aware of that responsibility as an artist for the past few years. And so I think in the future, BI will become even more in that vein, and not to be, in a preachy context, but to
Right.
continually try to communicate directly with the listener, because that continuum of consciousness between us and them, that doesn't actually exist. It's a universal force of consciousness that we're all sharing. And so when you come into an environment which seems reciprocal to your energy or your state of consciousness, that conduciveness and that resonance is what amplifies these good or bad deeds. And that's where karma gets into play, where it's like if you're fixating and espousing all this really negative, hateful, almost parasitic energy, where people are like glorifying the revelry of materialism and anti-consciousness and all this stuff. It impacts people. They grow up and they're reading these things and like, yeah, nothing matters, everything sucks, I'm worthless, so are you, who cares. That's going to affect people's subconscious behavior, and that's going to affect the collective consciousness of humanity. And so we as Blood Incantation are completely not into that. We want to help as best we can, and a lot of people don't think that's cool. We joke that when people, the less cool they think that it is, the more we're succeeding for that particular person, because you can only meet somebody where they're at. Like
Right.
if you're coming from here and they're over here, you're not going to sync up. You're not going to have that reciprocal energy where it's like a harmonic resonance. But as soon as you meet someone you'd never met before, when you guys start talking about something that's really meaningful to you on a spiritual or emotional level, you can become fast friends with somebody you've only known for 10, 20 minutes. And so, is it really possible to change the world with art? I think yes. I don't think Blood Incantation is obliged to do that, but we're trying our best in our little tiny niche, where it's like, we get a lot of people specifically focusing on the lyrics from this last record, where I just got one today where someone's like, hey, never heard your band, listened to it for a bunch, thought it was cool, but today I sat down with the lyrics for the first time, and I felt like you were speaking to me directly, and it like resonated with all this stuff that maybe I had come to the conclusion of independently on an acid trip or in meditation or something, where you're kind of getting out of body mentality. But that means a lot to me, and I didn't realize that it did until really just this record. Like I said, only within the past 4 or 5 years did I even try to make music to help people at all. I was just only ever making music because I like to listen to music. And now that people are responding to it like that, I feel really charged to try to make a difference for people, and to not just make cool riffs that are fun to listen to with a nice layout and a cool logo, but to have something really deep inside that cuts to the point of, what are we all doing here? What does it mean to be a human? What is the nature of human consciousness, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, you definitely hit on some very important points that I take into my own life. I believe that everything is reciprocal. What you put out there as a person, uh, how generous you are, how um, let I make a point to be less ego and just more of the best qualities I have as a person,
For
and
sure.
give that.
And that's
And
hard
so
work, conscious work to do, to
it
maintain,
really is. It
because
definitely
everything in
is.
the world is testing us.
100%.
The world is full of rude, inconsiderate people, selfish people, evil people, dark forces beyond human comprehension, and also positive forces beyond our comprehension, and very kind-hearted souls, compassion, gratitude. This is a huge thing. Gratitude is in the BI lyrics, in the message, it talks about generosity, the highest vibration, something from nothing, eventually the all from nothing, and that's that's very real. And that type of reciprocal energy that we were just talking about, some people, you could gentrify it and talk about like the abundance mindset or toxic positivity in the new age movement and all this type of stuff. That's a huge marketing scam, but it has its place. It has its origins in a place of truth. And if you greet the day with gratitude and openness, you'll find a much different everyday experience for you than if you wake up being like, oh, here we go again, another piece of shit like me that sucks, and here we go. Oh, that guy can't drive, or why is this person walking so slow? It's like I remember forget who it was, but they were talking about the crowd thing, where if you're trying to get through a large crowd at a show, for instance, if you are constantly focusing on how there's no path and everything is blocked and in your way, you're going to be doing this really random. Not you're going to be checking people, but if you focus on where these tiny openings are, the path will gradually unfold with smaller and larger openings as this path unfolds through a crowd. And consciousness is almost exactly like that in life, because our brains are seeking pattern recognition. And so when you focus on the positive and the gratitude and the openness and the compassion, you will see more of it, because your brain is just picking up on more of that in your field of vision as it is. And then, since our brains are not merely tissue and water and some electrical impulses, there's this electromagnetic force field coming, like the shape of a torus, of like a field around us from our heart and our brain, and the chakras and these energy centers that people have written about for a long time. But there's a legitimate, verifiable, proven by science, tangible energy field emanating from every human on earth. And whether it's your aura, your energy, however you want to look at it, it's just responding to what you're putting out there. And your subconscious mind doesn't understand things like sarcasm. It doesn't care if you're like just being funny. But when you wake up and you say, I suck, or I hate myself, or nothing's worth it, eventually life's going to just keep showing you things that bring that point home for you. Whereas if you wake up and you say, today I have something very important to do because I'm part of something that's happening, whether I'm participating or not, or contributing or not, something that's happening in the human mind, like the collective consciousness of humanity, is at a perpetual crossroads for the past 6,000 years. Every single day, the world ends and is born again, metaphorically and figuratively. And as we can see, the artifacts of society and industry sort of taking us in one of these directions or the other throughout history. It's art and human consciousness as a vessel of art trying to navigate this stuff. This is what truly leaves and elevates civilization against things like industry and militarism and conquest of capital over nature, and the subjugation of human will and human consciousness against the ever encompassing free market and things like that. But art can take people away. Art can, the suspension of one's disbelief to watch a horror movie or a sci-fi movie, that is, you get your brain into almost a similar mindset as when you're meditating or when you're tripping, because you have to let these trappings of materialism kind of go down. And you're like, okay, now I'm out here. Who am I? If everything else goes away, who am I? If all my obligations for the day dissipate, what am I left as? Who's this person inside of these impulses that we have to be acting one way or defending one identity or another? And like, this is a spiritual crisis of all times, not just modern times, and not just America and things like that, but this happening for thousands of years. And art and culture throughout ancient history on every continent has been cataloging and chronicling their discoveries and explorations into this conundrum,
Mm.
which is an ongoing spiritual test via incarnation and the samsara, the process of life and rebirth and all of these things. And we are here to try to notice what the universe is rapidly screaming at us from every angle. If you go to the forest, you can hear it. If you read a book on philosophy, you can see it. If you meet somebody who saves your life that you never met before, you can feel it. These things are happening everywhere, man, all day. Everything is a sign. In a way, everything is an offering for us to pay attention and take a chance on actualizing our own personal potential, and to get back to the BI aspect of it. 10 years of Blood Incantation, we didn't think about it like that. We were just trying to play sick music that we thought was cool, do it in a way that we thought was the way that pleased us the most, and just take it as far as we can on our own backs and be like, let's get this done. um, and only within the past couple of years, I would honestly say since Time Wave, did we really try to reconfigure the engine for
Mm.
what Blood Incantation is cooking with. And that was, I don't know if you really wanted to talk about Time Wave, but because there's
Man, we
no
can talk about anything you want to, Paul.
but there's no lyrics, right? So the music has to speak for itself. But similarly, you have to contextualize this coming off the back of a record like Hidden History, which is super dense, super intricate. It comes with a 20-page metaphysical pamphlet. It has all these solo titles of book names. All the song titles are book names. The album titles are book names. All this stuff, really dense. And so it didn't leave too much room for individual interpretation. It was really pushing it down people's throats. This is what we're doing. This is where we're coming from. This is what we're about. And it worked just fine. But the time wave time period was when, for over a year before we actually started writing those two songs, we just improvised together.
Yeah.
This is during COVID, so we couldn't go on tour, and everything's closed. So we just still went to the practice space, our usual rehearsal schedule, which is 4 to 6 days a week, 4 to 8 hours per day, and we would still go, and we dismantled all the metal backline, the drums, everything, so we couldn't even practice old songs if we wanted to, and we just improvised. And we did that for 8 months or so before we even got a computer to record. Like, we would record them with like a phone in the room or whatever. Also, at one point, 2020, we were playing out of our guitar amps before we eventually took everything down, because that sounds like shit. So much line noise and all this feedback and stuff. Synths aren't supposed to be played out of guitar amps, but we had to, because we were just focusing on this collective, mutual strangeness of just improvising. So then we finally got little mixers so we could control our individual instrument stations and send them to the board. And we got a computer and an interface, and we were able to start recording everything. And so we recorded like hundreds of hours of music, and most of it's really bad. There's still plenty of it that has yet to come out. Some of it was for the All Gates Open soundtrack to the Absolute Elsewhere making of documentary.
Yeah.
We made all the music for that. That's coming out soon as a standalone release. Um, and that stems from that same time period. So we're like collaborating, and with the benefit of multi-tracking and improvising together and stuff like that. And so that really changed how we approached songwriting, because in the past, on the first two records, like, I wrote most of the songs on Starspawn, but then Isaac wrote Chaoplasm, and then Isaac wrote the long song on Hidden History, and I wrote Giza and Slave Species. But then we all wrote Inner Paths as a group, and so that was like kind of the first time of us putting it all together in the space. Because typically, Isaac or I will just bring a riff skeleton to practice and be like, here's the harmony, let's do it this many times. And we would always still arrange it as a group or whatever, but most of the time the skeletons were coming from an isolated source, either Isaac or myself. And with Time Wave, it was completely collaborative, 100%. Like, there's not a single part in those 40 minutes where somebody is playing a part that someone else said, hey, can you play this? It goes like this, let me play this instead. None of that. It's 100% two people, or two hands, each person playing only whatever they wrote the whole album. And that was really fun, because it opened up a way to communicate with each other, because every band has their own lexicon at practice, and how they refer to riffs and sequences and stuff like that. And we're very lucky that when we met like 15 years ago, we already had more or less the same musical lexicon as far as referring to riffs and the sequences and how we phrase certain things to describe certain stuff. So we were already kind of on that wavelength together, but we never had the opportunity to truly utilize that collaborative energy, because, like I said, Isaac and I, when we write a whole song, it's more or less like, here it is. We can switch a couple parts, and obviously you play your solos. It's cool, but it was much more difficult to have that free energy of collaboration and mutual support when you've already written 80% of something. So
Right.
when we went into Absolute Elsewhere after Time Wave, we were really inspired to, like, let's make this as big as we possibly can, and let's put everything in the pot, and let's make everybody have their time to say what they're here to say. And so we got a taste of that with the Luminescent Bridge maxi single in 2023. And that was originally, so this is like two 10-minute songs, but it was originally supposed to be a 7-inch, and it was actually going to be for the Sub Pop singles series, which we eventually had to decline because their contracts are too restrictive. and they would have owned the rights to it, and it would have basically made it a throwaway track for us. But we don't necessarily believe in being in a band to make a throwaway track, so we had to say no. And then we were like, well, we can just do our own 7 inch, and it was going to be a 4 or 5 minute compact death metal song, and then an interlude, kind of like Meticulous Soul Environment on Starspawn that Morris wrote, and the outro to Awakening, the Mirror of the Soul at the end of Hidden History. Morris wrote that as well. So he and Jeff were working on this acoustic interlude that was, 3 minutes or something. And then Isaac had written Obliquity the Ecliptic when it was 4 or 5 minutes long. And we were practicing it like that for several weeks. Like, also, this time period we're looking at is from roughly November 22 till April 23. We were working on Absolute Elsewhere. And then finally in April, we were like, okay, we have to practice for this Obituary Immolation Ingrown tour coming up in April. And so we had to practice a set. Luckily, it wasn't a very long set. I think it was 30 minutes, maybe 25, 30. But we had that on the muscle memory. So we, every practice now we do the album. We would adjust the stuff with because we have like the computer and we're multi-tracking. So the bass, the drum trigger, the synths, the vocals, they're all going direct in, and then we're miking the cabs and drum overheads in the room and the snare, uh, and making like pre-production. It was the first time we ever did real pre-production like that, and we were adjusting the tempos like 1 BPM at a time, back and forth, and we could chop stuff up and switch it around to try to find the best sequence of stuff in the same tempo. And so we were doing that. Then we're like, okay, now we got to practice this album set or this tour set, and then we find out that the luminescent bridge thing's not happening with Sub Pop, and then it can't be a 7 inch because a label like Century, who are owned by Sony Music, by the time you press up a 7 inch, the unit cost has to be pretty exorbitant for the format because of the payroll, the art, all these people on the totem pole
Right.
being compensated for their time. You can't really. That's why major labels don't do 7 inches unless it's like a record store day Christmas single or something, because it's just not viable for them. So they're like, well, we could do a 12 inch single, and single sided or an etching or something, and we don't necessarily like to repeat ourselves. And so we were like, well, we did do a mini LP with Interdimensional Extinction, which is single sided with an etching. We also did it with Live Vitrification, which is a single sided screen printed thing with an etching. So we were like, we'd really not like to do that again. What about a maxi single, like 80s style, like Iron Maiden or Eloy and stuff? And they were popular with electronic music in the 90s, but why not a maxi single? Two 45-minute songs, then we could slow it down, or 45 RPM songs, so then we could slow it down, because we also like to do stuff like that. But so then we got that going, and then they're like, okay, well, for the maxi single, the minimum has to be 8 minutes, and we're like, oh shit, we have a 5 minute song and a 4 minute interlude. What are we gonna do? So we had about maybe a week, because they said for all of this to come out in time for Luminescent Bridge to be physically released in time for us to go on tour a few months later with Cannibal Corpse, Gorguts, and Mayhem in the fall of 2023. It had to be submitted by like April 17th or something like that. And this is the last week of March, and we have recording booked April 1st through 4th or whatever. I don't remember what it was. We were only there for a couple, 3 days. But all this is to say, we had about 5 days to make a 5 minute song, 10 minutes, and to figure out what we were going to do with this 2 or 3 minute acoustic interlude. So we go to this, we were practicing and we're stretching it out. We're making this really big epic part. And it was a pretty cool, I mean, Isaac wrote Obliquity pretty much A to B. And at one point, when it was only 5 minutes, it was going to maybe be on Absolute Elsewhere, as like track 2 if the message didn't end up taking up a whole song. Because at this time, we were still working on the back end of the message, which ended up being the longest part on the album. But so we stretch it out as a group. We had this totally crazy, like Iron Maiden level solo that Morris has been trying to work on, and it's a lot different from past stuff that he had done. Whereas like he made a deliberate emphasis to try to be like, it needs to be memorable, it needs to be singable, like basically Iron Maiden and the guitar solo in Time by Pink Floyd. Like he
Yeah.
didn't sing the
Yeah.
whole thing. And how do you do that as an extreme metal band? Because we also just love whammy abuse. We just love that melting infernal lava sound. So how do you strike a balance between infernality and a compositional, memorable melody? And so he succeeded tremendously at that. And then in the studio itself, we were doing all these new ideas, and we were. It was actually our first time recording everything separately. We'd never done that before. All our other records, just the four guys in a group recording live on tape. But Luminescent Bridge and Absolute Elsewhere are both digital. So we did it separate. And in the middle of the studio, we were recording the acoustic interlude, and Isaac's playing around the piano, and we brought all the acoustic instruments like the flamenco guitar and Jeff's 7 string fretless acoustic bass that he used on Star Spawn and stuff. And in the middle of trying to record it, we were like, wait, we should use the electric instruments, and it has a totally different sound than for instance like Meticulous Soul Environment. And then right by the drums or by the piano is the drum room, and we're like, Isaac, you should fucking play drums, like Funeral Doom drums on this like space thing, and we can throw some distortion. And typically I would say in the past, if we had had that type of spontaneity, we would have been like, we worked really hard practicing it this way, let's record it this way, maybe we can do that live or something. But because we had expanded our mutual camaraderie and this sense of collaboration with each other through Time Wave, we were like, let's go, let's put drums on, let's add distortion, add piano, let's make it this whole kind of like atmospheric space doom prog track. It doesn't have to be metal, it's just like, let's just see where it goes. And then it ended up being 10 minutes, as well as the outro for Obliquity ended up becoming like the solos, like the best part of the song. So a lot of people say that's like one of their favorite BI tracks of all of them, because it kind of has everything that BI does in one little truncated area, and which I know Isaac was deliberately trying to do. So there's like, there's Gorbid Angel Guts parts, there's like infernal immolation deadcon parts, there's the weird proggy clean parts, there's the space ambient stuff, but now there's this really epic like singable solo. Like someday people could sing it along, like an Iron Maiden concert, they could sing the solo with Morris, which I know he would love. But it's it was a really kind of just enlivening process where we were like, oh, we should just be more collaborative. And that's exactly what happened going into Absolute Elsewhere, because 2 months later we were in Berlin rehearsing for 10 days before going into the studio, and we were changing stuff into the very last minute until like 5 in the morning before we have to go to the studio at 8. We were like, let's fix this BPM and just make it happen. And all of that creative energy, all this is to say that creative energy is pretty tangible to us in the music of Absolute Elsewhere, where it's like the spontaneity is just like bouncing off the walls, everything goes. Arthur Rizek, also a tremendous asset as a producer, because he is extremely encouraging of these crazy ideas, whereas a lot of engineers, let's say, I want to add this bongo part, or like, can we try this with an acoustic guitar underneath or something, and might not sound good, but I just want to hear what it sounds like playing back or whatever. Sometimes producers would be like, hey man, we're burning tape, let's let's put that aside and focus on the task at hand or whatever. Art is very good at encouraging you to do that in a timely manner, and if it doesn't sound good, he's not going to chastise you for it and be like, see, I told you, or what a waste of time. He's just going to say, all right, well, I'll keep that, and maybe we can come back to it. And that's actually a funny thing about Arthur Rizek, is that when he produces, Absolute Elsewhere has literally hundreds of tracks, like individual tracks in Pro Tools.
I have no doubt about that.
It has so many tracks that at one time we actually had to lose an entire day, because Hansa Studios, a very professional, world-renowned studio, their Pro Tools maxed out at 256 voices being able to fire at the same time. So they had to upgrade their Pro Tools to be able to file, to play back more than 256 voices at once. And so, obviously you're not hearing 300 tracks 24/7, but there are moments on the album where there are, several hundred tracks firing at once, and most of it you can't really hear because the clarity of the mix is focusing on the instrumentation. But Arthur's skill set is, he will never throw away these weird takes that you do. If you're like, this is some weird idea, he will find a way. Like, let's say you wanted to add an acoustic guitar underneath something, but it didn't sound very good. He will find a way to incorporate that acoustic guitar track that does sound good in a very small way someplace that just kind of helps build the scene, or like a scene change. That's what he calls them. So like, in the movie, like this subtle, like the texture of the speed of the shot, or the texture of the color grading, all these little things set the mood. He's really big on that. And so he can find a way to incorporate almost any unusable sound, which, speaking of being in Berlin, that's like a super krautrock thing. In particular, this producer named Connie Plank, who recorded like the first four Kraftwerk albums, the Eurythmics, Can, a bunch, everybody, and including like Devo, and
Mhm.
a, a bunch of really crazy bands would go record with Connie Plank in his little home built studio out on a farm, because one, it was a creative atmosphere with no restrictions as to what type of ideas or non-musical, non-commercial value it might have. But also, he would find a way to incorporate useless sounds, and so that was something we were deliberately trying to do, and bring this collaborative energy of just like, let's make something where everybody has something to say, and we're not, you don't have to be self-conscious about proposing a strange idea in BI, because you're not going to get made fun of if it sounds like a ridiculous idea. Most of the time, it's like, okay, let's try it, and if it doesn't sound good, we just keep moving. We don't get hung up on it. And there's actually a scene in the All Gates Open documentary where Nicholas Malmquist from Hellas is doing some mini moog solos on the message, actually, on the epic speed metal part, when it first comes in out of the message part two, where it transitions from the speed or the acoustic, like Pink Floydy part with the Fender Rhodes piano and stuff, and it
Mhm.
bursts out into this like galloping speed metal part. There's a scene in All Gets Open where Nicholas is soloing on top of that, because it was just so wild. We were like, we have to just like smack the listener and be like, we're back. And it was too crazy. And in the documentary, you can see us debating it and taking multiple takes, and we wanted to include it to give people a little insight that it's like we were trying all types of. If you think that we just did everything and just left it, that is unfortunately not the case. We did try everything, but only that which served the essence of the album was left in the final cut. And so we wanted to illustrate that we had some ideas that didn't make it, because I know it might seem like a everything but the kitchen sink type of recording, but we definitely were still scrutinizing that which was in most in service to the song, and to the music, and to the listener's enjoyment, and for our ambition was, it was unbridled. It was so nice to just be able to record whatever we needed, and then if it didn't work, it doesn't matter. It's sometimes trying it is the best way to see that you actually need this other thing anyway.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
that the first take was best already. You take 10 takes and then you end up using track one. So
Yeah, and, you mentioned that, the band wanted to make something completely, epic and sounding, and, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the first one to tell you, but, I mean, BI definitely accomplished that. I'm constantly have that album on rotation ever since it premiered, and, I just I appreciate it for everything that you like, all the bands that you cited. I mean, I listened to it. My dad, was pushing, Pink Floyd on me at a very early age. Whether I mean, I don't think it was intentional or not, but I definitely, caught on to what he was doing and what he was listening to, uh, and for all the things that y'all like, everything in the kitchen sink put into all that absolute elsewhere, it just everything fucking works. I mean, I
well, thanks, man. We really did try our best. We were adamant to make something that, whether we succeeded at it or not, established we were really trying to make something crazy, and I think for better or for worse, I think we succeeded, at least for our abilities and our standards. But I think for better or worse, Absolute Elsewhere is a record we're going to be talking about more or less for the rest of our lives. Like, and I think that we still have lots of great music to offer that will hopefully be appreciated by people. But I do think that it's going to be a thing where a lot of people are like, that was it, and that's totally okay. People are like, Hard Work, Slaughter of the Soul, Blackwater Park, Master of Puppets, Dark Side, they did it, and there's
right.
other great records.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's where it all crystallized, and if Absolute Elsewhere is the one that did that, I think we did a great job. I really do. I think it means a lot to us to our lives have changed pretty considerably the past 18 months because the album itself was so delayed. Like, it was recorded in July 23 and it wasn't even announced until June 24, and it didn't come out until October 24. So it's really, we're only coming up on about a year now, but to us it seemed even older because it was recorded 2 years ago, but it was mostly written in the end of 22. So it's even older to us, but it
Mhm.
still feels so fresh to play. And no parts of it are tiring or boring. We're like, oh, here comes this part at the show. Like, it's still invigorating to play, and to see more and more people. Like, we keep we keep thinking we run into, okay, this is it. This is where it's going to be. Let's just chill. Let's enjoy it. And then a week later, we'll get some email that's like, "Do you guys want to do this?" And we're like, I mean, yeah, it's a constant unfurling of new energy and new opportunities for us that we absolutely do not take for granted, and really genuinely have gratitude and appreciation for the the journey. That's why we keep adding to the Absolute Else tour. We didn't necessarily intend for it to be this long and to still go. We thought, okay, let's do the tour, and then 2025, we can start doing some other stuff. But then it's like, this is some other new market we need to hit, some place we haven't toured before, and they're hitting us up, and it's like, well, that's that's what they want us to play there. So I guess we'll just keep it going. And we did incorporate the last tour and the next two. We changed the set from the first two, so we still have Episode Elsewhere in full, and
Mhm.
then we have songs. We're currently playing one song from every album except for Time Wave. So people can get a full spread. It's an 80-minute set, full spread of what BI has to offer. And one funny thing that we've noticed on the last tour specifically, because the two before that we just played the album and then Inner Path to Outer Space and Obliquity the Ecliptic. So one old song, one relatively new song, and then the album. And now we were playing songs from the demo, Interdimensional Extinction, one song from the demo, one song from Hidden History, one song from Starspawn, and Obliquity. And it's very noticeable that people have they don't know these old songs. And I've always been in the position where, I'm myself, many albums, I'm like, first album's the best one, or the demos. I get it. So people have done that to BI since our first record came out, and they said it wasn't as good as Interdimensional. And then Hidden History, they say, isn't as good as Starspawn, so on and so forth. It keeps happening. But the numbers of people who are at the Absolute Else Tour shows are predominantly new fans. They never bought Starspawn. They maybe saw the meme of Hidden History, but they don't know the old songs. So we're getting to re-enjoy showing people this old material now that we can play it a little more accurately as well. Because on a record like Interdimensional Extinction, you can physically hear us about to fail the whole time. We're playing at the absolute maximum capability, which is very slow. It's not quite not up to snuff. Still good songs, but the performance and like the production is lacking. So now we get to show people what that song sounds like with a little more power under the belt, and with the physical acumen being a little more on point, at least for our personal standards of how we were trying to do it the first time, but we were unable to because of our limited physical capabilities. But I'll be up there asking people about Star Spawn or something, and they're like, one guy in the back, "Hey, Stars Bond," and you're like, one guy, one person knows this song. Okay,
Oh,
uh,
no, man. For me personally, when I'm local to, New Orleans, basically, and, and BI use a lot of, Inferno, printing,
yeah, for sure.
for the merch. And, so I was looking at Brandon's, website, and I immediately saw this is how I discovered y'all guys. I was at the website, never heard a single note of BI, and I said, "That is one fucking." I mean, the advertising, the branding of Blood Incantation, second to none. It's fucking awesome.
Thanks,
So,
man.
so, so I was like, immediately. I mean, I'm outing myself right now, but I don't give a fuck. I bought the shirt first, And then I started listening to the music.
Nothing wrong with that, man.
And look, I was just totally floored. And I mean, I went by every single fucking, thing that, the CD. I went to Bandcamp, got the digital downloads,
Oh,
and I just
thanks.
been a fan. I've been a fan ever since. And I mean, shit, I started messaging you on my, on Instagram, yeah, I think, a few years back upon that discovery.
Ah,
And I was like, man, I was like, Blood Incantation is just always gonna be one of those bands. And like, y'all started just getting even more popular and popular with every release since then.
it's
And I was
pretty
like,
crazy.
there's no fucking way Paul is gonna, or anyone from the band is gonna want to like come on my podcast.
I don't mind.
I
You know,
appreciate it.
it's we're right now. We've been home for just 3 weeks or so since the tour, and we're going to start practicing again here. Isaac's, we're letting him focus on that right now. We'll start getting back on the grind here in a week or so because we do have a fest coming up in a few weeks. But I'm just mostly spending my time. I'm working on a lot of solo records. I have like 5 records coming out this year. One should be here any day. I'm kind of hoping it doesn't get caught up in these tariffs because it is shipping DHL on a pallet. But then 2 of the others I'm pressing in America, one's in Canada, and yeah. So I'm just working on layout stuff, building prototypes, and going to Kinkos, and just just biding my time. So that's actually the best time to do interviews and podcasts and stuff like that because typically we're being hit up to do it while we're on tour or immediately before or immediately after, and it's like that's the worst time,
Yeah.
when everything time is of the essence, and our energy is really spread thin. We don't have a lot of bandwidth to accommodate multiple requests, so then they get delayed, and everyone's like, I'm still waiting for this interview. That's why I typically do text interviews, because then I can do it, on the bus at night or whatever when I get home. But we love to do interviews. I mean, one thing is, like I said, when we kind of reconfigured the engine underneath Blood Incantation's hood, one of the things we were trying to do is actually the title of my next solo album, Demystification. And we are all about the demystification of this, putting art people as these unreachable pedestal types of things. Whereas, like, I hate to be interacted with like I'm not just a guy. I really don't like that, and I don't like people getting the impression that we would not just be guys. And so when people come in the middle of an interview that's like, hey, can we do an interview at this festival with 40 bands where you have a sound check at 1 and then load onto the stage at 2:45 and have to be out of the fucking backstage by 5:30 and all this
Mm,
stuff. Can
mhm.
we do an interview for 45 minutes? And it's just like, well, no, because we're already going to be flying by the seat of our pants just to get our job done that day. So we're not going to be able to give an honest interview from a place without stress. And if you do an interview when you're stressed and annoyed, I'm sure something will agitate you, or you'll come off the wrong way. That's the soundbite, that's the headline, and that's what people are twittering.
Yeah.
It's so annoying. But I really do believe in this demystification concept that's why the lyrics to the message are speaking directly mano y mano to the person, because no person listening to Blood Incantation is ultimately any different from somebody making Blood Incantation, and we're all in the same plane of existence of varying levels of you know social ramifications and consciousness, but we're all here. We're all the same. We have more in common with people we don't know than it's some of the people we're best friends with, and the human community and the animal kingdom and aliens, consciousness, metaphysical entities, all these things that are happening, we're part of it, and we want more than ever to let people know and to reassure strangers or people who are listening to the music and maybe don't know us as people, um, to demystify all that and get to the essence of the music. That's why it's just called the message. That's why it's like it's so simple. Like it's not trying to be some deeply high-brained philosophical dissertation on consciousness. It's literally trying to speak to my fellow human, asking them personally, what does it mean to be human? And let's go from there and follow this train of thought. And so, like I said, I think the next stuff is going to be even more down that line. And I guess the next release is actually instrumental, but after that, the metal stuff, with more lyrical content, that's going to be even more in that line where we're trying to unify the collective consciousness, and trying to help, not trying to hinder, not trying to obfuscate, not trying to sow dissonance, or cause people to experience pain and loss, and to feel these negative emotions. We want people to feel safe and comfortable, knowing that they are on part of this human mission with us on planet Earth, and that we're all here to do our own little part. And as a numbers game, there's always going to be assholes in the world. There's always going to be people who are embittered, or think it's about them, or that people owe them something and have a chip on their shoulder. That's not a personal attack on anybody that these people are rude to. As a many years of my life, I was an extremely arrogant, rude person, and I was very young, and I was very naive and inexperienced, and I thought me and my 8 friends knew everything there was to know. As is the case for many circles of friends around bands in small towns. And many of those people made greater records than we ever did back in the Salem days. But if you look at it now, Mismore might even be bigger than Hell. But like Hell playing Roadburn live at Roadburn, Mania doing all this stuff at Roadburn. Leech never made it that far, but we are ostensibly working on a pretty comprehensive archival discography box set of our split records and demo recordings and unreleased pre-production rehearsal recordings from our album from 2006 that never got recorded, which we played on tours. When we played at shows, we recorded and tried to do all this stuff, but it just never happened. Um, and, I'm always running into people that I burned from back then, or that my attitude put a thorn in somebody's side that festered for long enough that it came back to bite me in the ass. And I learned a lot from my own personal crucifixion by karma, as it were. And I'm just trying to, not necessarily absolve myself from that stuff, but to repair what I can, and in the meantime disseminate more positive or healing energy for people to take with them. And there's never going to be a shortage of people being like, one time Paul Riedl was this to me, because I'm a complicated guy, and everybody loves a strong-minded, opinionated artist once they're dead. So in the meantime, I've made a lot of friends and a lot of enemies, and people have a lot of impressions about me. But that's why demystification is so important. I mean, I just actually submitted the it's a double album actually, with one disc is Paul Riedl and the other is my acoustic alter ego Hanging Moss, and it's called Demystification and Forestscapes, and it's a double LP, double CD, and I actually just paid for the pressing just like 2 or 3 days ago. It's pressed at Yosuke from Nuclear War Now's plant Helios in Texas. So I'm trying to bypass some of the cost from international shipping and dealing with all this stuff. In worst case, I can just drive down to Texas from Denver and I'll just pick them up.
Yeah.
Worst case, but yeah, demystification. The holistic integration of variable consciousness. These things are really important to me.
Yeah.
Maybe not to everybody, but for Blood Incantation and for what me and my buddies are trying to do, we're trying to help. We're trying to make the world slightly better, even if it's only the equivalent of one better riff that you heard that day on Spotify. Just we're just trying to help, man. And it's much, much easier for people to try to criticize us for being silly gooses who are just being dumb online. But it's like, that's what we are in real life. So why would we hide from you? Why would we
No
try to
shit.
profiteer this thing and present this false image, but a lot of people actually want the false image, because that once you find out there's something to be said for people separating the art from the artist, but then there's also people who kind of thrive on that disconnect of like, oh, this person is like even in underground metal, people do this where they're like, oh, this guy from this band is more like a celebrity. Like people treat, guys from bands like Autopsy, like Chris Reifert, who was the officiant at my wedding. This is not a celebrity. This is a very sensitive, compassionate human. And he's lived his entire life that way. And yet some people, they'll punish him and they'll come at him with this crazy energy. And no one he's not asking people to do that. Like, he happens to have been there at a time when he was trying his best to set things in motion, and those artifacts are still just as resonant with people today. Sometimes even more so. Certain records get even better with age.
Yeah.
But this is not a celebrity. I'm not trying to compare Chris Reifer's status in the metal scene to Blood Incantations by any mean, but I'm just trying to illustrate the physical interconnectivity of those two bands, and our wedding photos mixed with the types of punishment that all bands of all stratums, all bands will experience this sort of disconnect where because you're in a band, you're no longer a person. Because you make products, you're not you're just this. I don't know how to describe it, but there's this expectancy of being something other than just a human, just a regular person behind this art. And I think that's one of the hardest things for people to get, because typically when you want to separate the art from the artist, it's because they're problematic, not because they're human. It's because you want to separate the things that make them human, their flaws. You want to amplify that and pigeonhole them as these bad people. But what about when no one wants to pigeonhole you as being a good person? And it's like, oh, I don't like that band because that guy's really nice. He doesn't want to spread dissonance and pretend to be a fake Satanist and all this occult stuff. This man has seen people be murdered, so he doesn't want to see people be murdered anymore. This person has seen life taken away from him, so he now values life. That sucks. It's so corny. And there's genuinely people out there who believe that.
I
And,
believe it.
there really are. And for BI, I think coming from the underground that we did, which is, cult demos, extreme logo, not high concept, but like, pretty niche territories for the aesthetics with the Anunnaki stuff and the ancient Sumerian. And, it's a pretty specialized niche for people to get into. And then you find out that these guys are talking about what does it mean to be a human, and that we're all together and generosity is the highest vibration. And a lot of people, they don't want to listen anymore because of that. And that's totally their prerogative. We don't hold it against them at all. But as it has turned out, more people want to listen to that than people don't want to. And the people we lose in that fold, that's okay. Because, like I said, you can only meet people where they are. And maybe not everybody is ready. I don't even necessarily want to say ready because it implies something bigger than just being present to experience what this band is saying. But some people just don't want to have a band talk to them about their own mutual humanity. And they want to have this posturing, imperceptible veil of like, here's my crazy band aesthetic and don't talk to me. Here's my really aggressive interview answers, which I also used to do 20 years ago. These interviews were pretty cringe. Um, but I'm just not that person. Nobody in Blood Incantation is that person. Even if we might have started out that way 15 years ago, I was on the waning cusp of coming out of some of the darkest and most nihilistic years of my life. And so I carried over some of that vitriol into Blood Incantation's early interviews and early presentation, because it really was me against the world. And I felt like I was trapped in a corner and that the world owed me something and that I had something to prove and a chip on my shoulder about it. But as I learned more about myself and humanity and consciousness and all these things, I realized that, that's all of that can be chalked up to me being from a small town and being naive and arrogant. All of it. It can be, that's my inexperience was clouding my judgment, which is almost often the case for all forms of human civilization, because it's ignorance which is ultimately the greatest enemy of mankind. And this is why people say things like Mark Twain said that travel is the anathema to prejudice, because you're going to meet these strange people from faraway lands and find out you have more in common than the fucking police officer on the end of your block. People are everywhere trying to make ends meet, take care of their families. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to have human connection and value their time on earth with other people. And then there are people who pretend that those things aren't important to them, and they're posturing as this fake, idol of whatever. And I think that, people say a band like BI is pretentious, and that's fine. I think that there's nothing wrong with valuing your art and believing in it and trying to do it the best you possibly can. But that's also like, if you were to call an athlete pretentious for trying to play the best game that they could, that's why they're training for it. That's what they're trying to win. They're push their body beyond the physical limits that they're aware of and win something that has a record. Like an award is just a record for an athlete to say, I did it this time. That's fine. A lot of people will win one award and stop because they did it. But more often than not, you get the award and it's almost like you just made the record. Now it goes on the shelf. You can listen to it again. You can pick it up and hold it and remember what it was like. But the work is never done. That's one of the most important things about humanity and art in particular and consciousness, is that the work is never, ever done. There is no plateau. There is no end of the story until you physically die. And even then, That's just a transition from one state of existence to another, of which we're just beginning to kind of dabble with our understandings with in clinical sciences. But in the ancient world, was always part of a continuum of consciousness across life and death and rebirth, and this like cyclic reincarnation through lifetimes and planets and other timelines and all this stuff. And so, just for my own, personal well-being, I had to just let go of a lot of that nihilism and negativity and try to be more constructive with my time, because the easiest thing to do in life is to complain that you don't like how something already is. The harder thing to do is to change it to make it better for you, and that's the it's a victim mentality, and I know people don't like to hear that, and people get say, well, it's
Oh no, people
easy
want
for
to.
you because you got your band that people go to the shows for, and it's like, but I didn't for my first 15 years of being on tour. It didn't stop me. BI tours. BI was actually the first band I was ever in where people went to our shows, and not on our first tour for Interdimensional, but on the Starspawn tour. That was the first time in any of our bands I've been on tour since 2007, 18 years, man, over half of my life. And I did it because I love music. I love to share. I love to play. I love to see the world and experiment with stuff and get these new experiences. But nobody cared about any band I was in except for like 30 people, maybe 60 people at a show until Starspawn, literally. And all these other bands that were going on tour, living paycheck to paycheck, being so like people think I'm fat now, but it's like I just am no longer living paycheck to paycheck, and I can eat. I don't have to eat ramen with boiled broccoli every day anymore. So I'm fat. Forgive me. But that's why I was so skinny for 15 years, because I was so fucking impoverished that I was just eating ramen noodles and protein shakes every day because that's all I could afford. And it's like, I it's amazing to see people criticize a successful band, which I used to do myself, because I now realize that when I was jealous in 2007, when I would see a band that I thought was cool all of a sudden be on a big label, I was like, oh, that sucks. Or all of a sudden they're opening for a big package tour. I'm like, oh, that sucks. I liked it when I saw them on the floor and they played in my basement because we used to have shows in our house and stuff. Um, but I used to be that guy. And now it's with no irony at all. I can admit I was just insanely jealous of these people, especially if we're doing something similar, playing a similar style of folky long form song, black metal from the forest with rain on top, or, whether it's ambient or death metal. But I was like, I want to show people what I got. And that's what those early BI years were really me trying to come out of that nihilistic jealousy time period and use all of that energy to make something that was very powerful and would hit people straight out the gate and be like, no, I'm very serious. You might know me from my obscure tapes that people still pay exorbitant amounts of money for, um, on eBay, which is another thing I should say. Just not that it's too important, but people have been buying like Woodsmoke tapes and special frequency tapes, my labels on eBay for $100 since 2008.
Oh,
So I,
Dallas and I looked up one of the latest prices on Discogs,
it's pretty
and
expensive.
people were paying like upwards of $250 for those tapes,
Pretty,
man. And Dallas has 41 and 50.
yeah, and like, at the time in 2008, I was 21, so I we liked that notoriety because we were like, that's really cool. That means it's like fetishized and precious for people. It's actually really stupid, and it's like this price gouging flipper mentality. That's why BI has never been one of these artificial scarcity bands where we're like almost anti-limited. We'll do something like, let's say, 500 copies tour edition, or special band edition or whatever, but the records themselves, the physical records, are accessible all the time. And some people are like, why do you guys flood the markets? And it's like, well, because I don't want some kid to pay $100 for my 7 inch. I really don't. That's why the we were starting to notice this, even in the Leech days, so that by the time 10 years later, when we're doing the Spectral Voice Blood Incantation split, me and Aaron, the guy who released it with me on Bleak Environment and my label Woodsmoke, we made it say pay no more than $10 on the back, because we already knew people were doing that. Like people were flipping a BI rehearsal tape in 2013, and it's like, this tape sucks. We made this to try to find a bass player in town, and there's a cover because I like making tapes. Like, these are, just as an example, these are 3 records that are just prototypes. These are not real records, but they have inserts, they have labels, they have all the stuff that to refine the layout before I finally submit to the pressing plant. And so we were seeing people do that to these tapes 15 years ago, and we're like, dude, this sucks. This tape is not worth that much money. And obviously, I'm guilty. I've paid the piper on plenty of records, but I do typically try to not support that mentality because you know, for instance, I probably paid too much money. I think I paid like $200 for the first Morbid Angel tour shirt that they screen printed themselves in their house in South Carolina,
Holy
1988.
shit.
And I was like, okay, this this one I can do. This is a lot of money, but this is crazy. This is not like people are paying $300 for like a 2008 bolt thrower shirt. It's not the same thing. Um, and generally, I really try to spend. I've spent probably $100 on at least 20 or 30 records, but I have like 4,000 records. So,
I spent $400. I paid Pete Sandoval
oh hell yeah,
during COVID, whenever he was selling
yeah, yeah.
his tom.
Some of those too.
I got a floor tom.
Hell
I got
yeah,
a rack tom and some drumsticks, and I'm probably paid upwards of $800 to
dude.
Pete.
I bought a tom head that was recorded on formulas, and another tom for that was on the Altars of Madness first European tour.
I got
And
some terrorizer stuff. I'm sorry to cut you
yeah,
off. I got some terrorizer stuff and some altars shit.
yeah, that stuff is cool, and it's
It
like that.
is.
That
It
you're
is.
supporting that guy directly. It might be a lot of money, but to him, he's also doing good stuff. He's like running like some type of animal sanctuary or something over there.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so it's cool, and it's like you're not just giving it to some random dude on eBay. It's like if you're gonna pay the piper, that's a good way to do it. I got no qualms with that, and I've also done it myself many times. But back to the BI thing, when people do that to us, it's like, why do you do that when we have like that's why every black vinyl pressing of Starspawn, Interdimensional, Hidden History, they're all identical.
Mhm.
Every single time there's been a colored variant, Matt will press like, it's like 300 one color and then 700 black every time. And so there's only like 4 or 5 black vinyl interdimensional listings on Discogs, but there's like 15 pressings. And it's like every one of those has a black vinyl pressing in addition to whatever color is the one that's listed.
Yeah.
So there's tens of thousands of these records out there. I would honestly not be surprised if BI has physically moved over 100,000 records if you combine all the stuff.
That's fucking
Uh,
insane, man.
it's pretty insane. And when you think about it, a band like, let's say, Altars of Madness, the first pressing of Altars of Madness was 20,000 LPs in 1989. The first pressing of Starspawn was like 1,100. And so when people get mad that you're repressing it and devaluing these pressings, it's like, dude, why are you paying $200 for an Altars of Madness first pressing when there was literally tens of thousands? Because just the first one in August '89, I did another one in November. They did another one in January. Then they did the Grind Crusher one in early '91, and it's
Mhm.
like there's tens of thousands of original pressings of almost every record on Earache, Roadrunner, all these very classic $100, $200 records. Until you get to about 94 or 95, then they start becoming maybe 10,000. So maybe there's 10,000 copies of Heartwork or something, maybe 30. But
Yeah.
regardless, 20,000 copies seems like a fuck ton of records. It's really not in the grand scheme of things. And there's probably 100,000 copies of Altars of Madness pressed just from '89 to '93. Just
Mhm.
then. And so that's why they were on the Covenant got to SoundScan for like 250,000 units just for that record. Just that one record, not including their other stuff.
Right.
So every time we think we reach a plateau and we're like, oh, this is as crazy as BI can get, the page turns again and it's like, well, okay, now we got to go do this crazy thing. And 15 years ago, I was not personally um, emotionally capable of handling that type of stuff. I wasn't ready to step into that type of a position as an artist or as a guy playing guitar. But I realized that self-sabotage and that nihilistic kind of like, people call it pick me now. But that type of woe is me, somebody owes me something mentality. It's really unfortunate, but it's a real thing, and it crippled my life for almost 10 years of my life.
Paul,
Uh,
I like to you said a key word there, self sabotage, man. And I know just about every person who has a conscious and doing something worthwhile in their life creatively. Um, Whenever you have those moments where you're in, you're battling, your mental
right.
well being. How do you redirect that type of thought process?
Well, I have to do a bit of shameful self promotion at this time because I'm getting a vinyl pressing of this mixtape I made a couple of years ago called Ambient Mixtape Volume 5, also known
Hmm.
as the Water Tape. It's one of my favorite mixtapes that I made back in the COVID era, right after. And I describe in the liner notes of this thing, this whole story from how I got from basically Salem, Oregon in 2002 to Blood Incantation in 2025 and making all this like healing meditation music and music as therapeutic aspects of music and things like that. And I only recently learned, as recently as 2022, that something I learned back in 2009 when my buddy Jory died, who was the bass player vocalist for Moon, which was like a funeral doom drone sludge band back in the Salem days.
Hmm.
Pretty extreme stuff. And we, when he died, I recorded a tape called Corcarlin and this demo called Zero and Acrony, which is on my YouTube. And it was basically an audio wake where I found out Jory had died, and then I buried myself in this random pile of everything, whatever electronics I had in my room at the time, and I just recorded a bunch of stream of consciousness music, which is rather morose and empty sounding, but eventually resolves someplace kind of peaceful. And so I made a bunch of this tape, and one fun thing about that tape, the Corcarlin, is this 2009, and I dubbed by the end of I haven't made them in years, but I dubbed close to 1,000 of these, and never were they for sale. It was only ever for trade or just given away. And so I've actually thought about reissuing this. However, I have a sort of moral conundrum because I don't necessarily want to capitalize or fetishize my friend dying. But the music I made, this is what you're asking, and this is what it's about. The music I made at that time was really therapeutic for me.
Hmm.
That was in 2009, and I didn't retain that aspect of getting out of that dark pit of whether it's self-sabotage or loss. I didn't know how to play my way out of it until um, after my dad died in 2020. At the end of the year, I was like, I had not made a solo tape in almost 10 years. I think 2013 was the last time I put out a solo tape before. I did one promo tape for Hovercraft in 2020, but then in 2021, I started doing stuff under my own name, and I released like a new Hovercraft album and Hanging Moss and all this. All I, the well has been opened finally. But as I detail quite explicitly in this liner notes, I only learned how to navigate out of that pit of self sabotage and the woe is me and where do I go. Like I didn't think I was going to make any music again for years. Uh,
Wow.
like since Hidden History, which like I said, I wrote most of the Starspawn stuff, and then Isaac wrote a 20-minute song of a 35-minute record. So then I wrote Giza, Slave Species, and then we collectively wrote Interpass. But Giza was written in 2013. It was the sixth song we ever wrote right after the demo before any Starspawn songs. And at the time, it was actually going to maybe be track 2 on Starspawn because that's a really good second track. But we didn't record it till 2019, so I didn't count that as writing new music because it was so old by the time we recorded. It was 6 years old song, that I had written when I was 24 or something, 25, and then Slave Species had songs that also riffs that predated Starspawn, which I was kind of incapable of arranging until after we got a little bit better at guitar. So the two songs that I wrote on this album were old, So even though we had this brand new album, I hadn't written a song since Starspawn, and Starspawn was recorded in January 16, and all of that music was written in 2013 or 14. So it was like we were playing 4 out of the 5 songs on Starspawn on our first BI tour when Interdimensional had only been out for a few weeks. So even when Starspawn came out, that's really old stuff for me. So by the time I got to, and also, I think I guess the Spectral Voice debut album, like that has this different. We have a different approach for writing for that band. Like on the demo, I wrote one song, Eli wrote one song, and we co-wrote the other song. And then on the album, it was always a lot more collaborative for Spectral than it was for BI, because Isaac and I have pretty exacting tastes about what we want the stuff to do until this post time wave expansion of our collaborative energy. But I hadn't written a Spectral song in 2 or 3 years by the time Hidden History was recorded. I hadn't written a BI song in 5, 6 years, so I was really very, very depressed. Actually, I was feeling like I'm a useless guy, all my best riffs are behind me, and I'm not going to be able to get out of this, until my dad died. And he cracked open this part inside of me that was like, I felt a deeper hole in myself than I'd ever felt. And I'd been in some pretty nihilistic dark pits of like, contemplating bad choices since, self-harm and depression and alcohol and drugs and all that stuff. And I, had a really dark past, especially in Oregon. And this pit that my dad's death sent me into was like unbelievably deeper than I had thought even physically possible. And so I was like, now I'm fucked. I'm never going to make music ever again.
Yeah.
I can't feel anything.
Yeah.
So, and also around in the world at this time, it's lockdowns, everything sucks. We lost 6 tours for BI. Spectral Voice had released this compilation, which arrived damaged, and like 384 copies out of the 600 first pressing were damaged. So we had to delay the announcement of it till the second pressing, and all the money we'd made on this last European tour in 2019, Spectral lost like 15,000 euros in cash in 1 second.
Fuck.
We were just like, everything was so depressed at this time. And then when my dad died, I was like, this is over. I can't make music anymore. But eventually I went into the studio, and like in our rehearsal studio, which we'd built up during COVID, and we were able to record all this stuff. And I have my own little synth station as well. And so I just recorded. I did the same thing we did during Time Wave, but I just recorded every day. I just made all this nonsense. And that's actually where these mixtapes started. I did 5 ambient mixtapes, which vary between 45 and 90 minutes. And during that time, I actually stumbled upon the right combination of improvising, composing, multi-tracking, and looping. And that's what actually became the hovercraft record Schweben music, which means floating music. And that record was dedicated to my dad. That came out in early 21. And that was the first new music I was able to write since 2013 or so, not including band stuff. And that sort of reignited this thing in me where I was like, okay, I need to play my way out of this emotion. I need to, like, the only way for me to escape is I need to play, I need to record. It doesn't need to necessarily come out. I don't need to be doing it for something. I just need to be playing and improvising. And then I ended up making this tape, the Water tape, which was probably my favorite of the ambient mixtapes. And it's also probably why it's getting the vinyl treatment, because it's the best one in my opinion. But as soon as I finished this up, I was like, okay, I can make healing music. I can make music which is therapeutic for me, as also for maybe somebody to listen while they're in a dark place. And as soon as that happened, early 22, I was crushed by another extreme unforeseen stress where I was like, I'm in a bind, and I've caused this for myself, and I'm in big trouble, and I gotta get out of this. I've self-sabotaged myself into a very bad situation.
Yeah.
And that time, thankfully, I instinctively now knew I could play my way out of. I need to go make music. And so in this pit of stress, of self-sabotage, where I was like, oh my God, I finally thought I figured something out, and now I'm fucked. What am I supposed to do? I went and I recorded, and I ended up making my first debut solo album, Ocean of Peace, which came out later that year. And so now I understand that if I'm in that mode where I'm feeling stuck, it's because I have to physically play and let stuff go and just improvise and just let it come out. And it doesn't matter if it sounds bad. It doesn't matter if it sounds, good or usable. You don't have to use it. You just have to play. At least for me, I just have to be able to make music. And even if it's just bleeps and bloops, I can just sit in the practice space and just let the loop pedals play. I'm not even doing anything. Actually, some of my mixtapes, that's exactly what's happening. I'm not playing. I'm just letting these things kind of autonomously generate into do configurations with the tape and a couple different loopers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that has become my go-to therapeutic approach to self-sabotage and how do I get out of this. And even for my place in BI, that really helped, because going through all that process, 2019 to 22, that's what set me up to be emotionally capable to make music like Absolute Elsewhere. And I know the other guys were also having their own individual binds at that time. Everybody was having a bad time during those years, really. Like around the world, everybody was having.
Yeah, man, everyone's going through their own fucking share of shit, that's for sure,
Yeah,
myself included.
yeah. So that's how I do it now, and I've only recently rediscovered that, and it's very valuable to be able to know that now, that it's like, okay, the next time I'm having this self-sabotaging doubt and whatnot, I just need to create something just for myself. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to sound cool. I don't need to release it, but I do need to go and try to make something, and like not to get like discouraged if, let's say I try to multi-track something and it's like, this doesn't sync up or it's loose or whatever. Just turn the click off. Don't worry about the grid. Just play and just make it. And then maybe by the end of it, you record for 3 or 4 hours, maybe 20 minutes of it's cool.
Mhm.
That's more than enough, man. That's just enough. And then listening to that one little snippet, that's the part that puts you in that meditative headspace, or at least for me, puts me in that meditative headspace. And that's actually the water tape is from May to November 2021. It's all these different samples, like multiple little pieces that all just happen to be of the 10 hours I recorded that week. This 5 or 10 minute section is the part that puts me in that spot again, where I can feel safe and encouraged to just be at peace. And so that's why I put it out to try to help other people, and to, if they, if it makes me have a little bit of peace of mind and helps me chill out listening to some of these frequencies and other people, that's just a bonus. So it's I want to try to spread that energy, share that peaceful mindedness to as many people as possible, because I genuinely believe that, if two positive, loving, grateful people walk into a crowd of 100 angry misanthropes, that there will be 7 or 8 positive people who leave, and only 97 or 93 misanthropes will still be in that room, because generosity and gratitude is contagious. Smiling, laughter is the best medicine. All these things are very real, and I think
Very
that
real.
people, they fetishize the nihilism because that's what society wants you to do. Religion depends on you believing that there's nothing else after this, so either repent or don't. But the continuum of human consciousness beyond physical material life on this plane is something that has been discussed by every culture on every continent of the earth for millennia, and it's only the past couple 100 years where we're like, oh, that's nonsense. Of course, it's only how much is in my bank account, or what my car looks like, or what country says this, and all these things. And it's like there's just a lot more to life. And I think the pursuit of peace and sharing your own inner peace with other people is positive. And I think that yeah, it's hard to say because life has got so much darkness, but I do think that fighting darkness with darkness doesn't necessarily help. And I think that
No, it doesn't.
well,
No, man. And you hit on it. I had a question for you, and you said it, and I guess you answered in so many words there. But one of my questions was, when do you feel like you're at your most human connected with someone? Like whenever like where you feel like what's your idea or your own philosophy of the human connection?
well, I guess it's a good question. I would say probably something kind of simple, maybe stupid, like if you're just in a forest watching a river and nobody's talking. That's like a pretty profound time I'm trying to do. The trees in Colorado are not quite as nice as I'm used to in Oregon, where they're all big and mossy. Forest here feels a lot different. So, I mean, it's an arid, it's a high mountain desert, obviously, so it's not the tree's fault. But watching the ocean, things like that, like I said in the beginning, where they put you in your place in the perspective of where human is, where you as a human are in this big mosaic of what's happening in reality. But also, just the other day, just because this new album is a lot different type of music approach, and the lyrics specifically, there was like, I don't know, it's always in the message, which has these lyrics which are the most direct. But like we were up there playing, and We do. The album is recorded to a click track, and so we have a click in our ears for just the album. All the other
Mhm.
songs we didn't, so we just play them normally, which is also cool because so it gives the set's not completely rigid. But I do think we spent enough time on the tempo maps that the fluidity of the album recording is, you know, it doesn't restrain it by being on a click. It's like it's still very flowing. But sometimes something will happen and we'll get off the click, and so Jeff will disable it, and we just keep playing. And in those moments when we're up there playing this music, which was created with the tempo map and all this complex infrastructure to support it, and we're still playing it, we're still able to do all the transitions and all these parts just fine. Because that's how we were trained to make music. But when we were doing that for this specific music, and like there was, I think we were in Portland or something, but I'm like looking out and this person was straight up crying during the end of the message where the parts are it was the end of the song. We call it the gnome in the grass, where they see mellotron flutes and like hand drums. And it's like the parts of the lyrics are, it's the whole generosity, highest vibration, sowing peace through deeds, all that. It's like that time period of the song.
Yeah.
This person is just crying and singing the lyrics, and I was like, damn, this is like a pretty emotional thing. And my mom was at this show, and my mom only ever saw me play a show for the first time 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago. Yeah. And she came out to see me do a solo show opening for the new Wayfair album release show in Denver, and that meant a lot because my parents never saw me play. And it was just in that exact moment, man, playing with these people, this music that is so positive and like trying to be hopeful and instill a sense of camaraderie and community in the listener. And my mom is there, and there's like, it's an all ages show, so there's like kids there that are freaking out on the barrier, and there's like these old dudes they saw Pink Floyd on their first US tour. Everyone is there, and we're playing, and the click is off, and it's just like this is genuine human artistic connection. We're like reveling in that moment. And I didn't get that out of music for the times before that. I was just playing because I like music and I'm trying to show people something. But I'm more I'm more aware of it now, where it's like this really beautiful special thing that it's like we're sharing, like it's called the message, and like
Yeah, right.
it seems so on the nose, but also sometimes life really is that simple. And when we're out there specifically playing that song, those lyrics, and people are having that type of an emotional reaction to it, it totally changed how I view the music and listen to the song. And like, I'll be on stage and like, tearing up, being like, man, this is so intense. Like, this is so much emotion in this part. And to see people resonate with that is like really powerful and really inspiring. And to be like, there's 1,000 people in a room having a shared emotional response to this stuff. And that's like, that takes me out of myself like nothing else. It was really crazy. And it didn't start happening until this album, really. But again, I didn't try until this album to make a connection with people. I wasn't motivated to connect with my fellow human for almost 20 years of my musical life. And only now am I starting, like, fuck, maybe I should have been trying a little harder to keep it real on that level, and relate to people, make a musical, or at least a lyrical content that is relatable to people. I'm not trying to like speak down on them or abstract their consciousness into some weird, far-fetched, sci-fi thing. I want to relate to people. I want to make music that makes people relate to it. I want to show people that they're not alone, that hope is omnipresent. It's perennial, like the grass. It'll always come back, and it's always darkest before the dawn. All these little cliches I really believe in. And I understand that not everyone is ready for that type of stuff, and that's totally okay. I wasn't for over half of my life. But now that I have been made aware, now that I have received the message, so to speak, it's all I can. It's all I can do, but to keep trying to disseminate that type of energy to people and create music which is, either peaceful or inspiring, or whichever. It can be powerful and loud and crazy, but also inspire you and make you feel hopeful, and not take things for granted. Tell people you love them. Don't be a person behind a wall. Try to be all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely, man. Whenever I rehear, listen to Absolute Elsewhere, there's seems like a barrage of these moments on that album where it's just it takes you on a journey. No, obviously, but to me personally, on a personal level, it's just like moments of triumph. You
Thanks.
know.
I mean, the Canadian band Triumph. The
Yes. Yes.
So we like those guys. I'd actually never even heard them until their documentary. If you haven't seen their documentary, I highly recommend it.
I've seen it.
So like I had never even heard of this band, but I cried watching that documentary because it was so inspiring. And so now we have a gag where it's about the triumph, and we would like, when something really positive is happening and overcoming the great odds, we look
Oh
at
yeah.
something about the like triumph, for triumph, but not like for our triumph, for like the collective triumph, and what those guys did and all the stuff they had to go through to make it happen. And that's funny. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a triumphant record. I think as an artistic statement, I think it's a triumph. But also, we tried our best, and hopefully, the next one is just as crazy, if not crazier. And like I said earlier, I do think that people will probably be doubling down on Absolute Elsewhere as the one for more or less the rest of our lives. But that's also okay. I mean, if that's the one you're going to pick, I think that's a great one to pick. And
It's
let
it's
us.
it's a real toss up for me. I'll be completely transparent here. I mean, absolute and hidden histories, man. It's just
Yeah,
you
I mean,
know.
they're pretty complex. I mean, I would say the main issue that I think we had with Hidden History is it's a little muddy because it's on tape and there's so many notes, and like that's part of
Yeah.
that's why it sounds so classic. Actually, the Starspawn and Hidden History were both recorded on an Otari MTI 90, which is the same exact tape console that Morrisound used from 85 to 94. So that's why it sounds so classic. We're using
Mhm.
and we were using an AMEC Rembrandt, which is the little brother console, only 44 channels of the Mozart, which is the AMEX 72 channel board or whatever that they were using at Morrisound. So we have the same AMEC and Neve preamps on board through the same tape machine that they were using for Morrisound. So that's why they sound exactly like they're meant to be that way, But we maxed out the tracks on Hidden History and on Time Wave actually. But we were doing the patch bay looked like a straight up like computer malfunction. It was like everything was patched all crazy because we were trying to bounce on all the empty space of the allocated tracks because on tape recording you can't just keep adding ideas.
Mhm.
And so we ran out of tracks, which makes them sound a little to us like the mix of Hidden History is pretty dense, and I think it sounds really good. I really do. But the synths, I think, should be louder, and I really did. I like the guitar tone quite a bit. It's really meaty. But I think there's not a lot of space to really detect everything in it. Whereas Absolute Elsewhere is like a panorama. Like if you put it in headphones, like you're like in the middle of this
Oh
really
yeah.
cool thing. Whereas Hidden History, the sound is more towards the front area of your listening. Still think it's totally cool. But I think that's the production of it was we were trying to put too much stuff in it, and there are limitations for tape recording, and that happened to be one of them. And I think that's what's something we were conscious of for Absolute Elsewhere. We were like, well, we've been limited, we've maxed out the tracks. Let's see how far we can go. But then again, we actually maxed out the Pro Tools. Even they had to get an upgrade to a new edition of Pro Tools just to accommodate more than 256 voices. So who knows? Maybe we need a computer with like 10,000 tracks, and we can make like a space opera or something. But I do think Hidden History is pretty solid. I think if I had to choose between the two, I'm a little more partial to Starspawn between Hidden History because I think the production is just so immense. Like it just sounds like it's exploding the entire time. And Hidden History is like right up front. It's like hitting the hammer right on their door. Um, so we tried to strike a balance between those two production styles for Absolute Elsewhere and have it that's like big, huge panoramic sound stage, but also really clear, but still hot. Like not smooth. Like the guitars, sometimes you're like, is it too hot? But that's what's good. You want it to be like a little too hot, and that is also a reason why this actually impacts the songwriting for Absolute Elsewhere because as we were getting the pre-production ideas with stuff like synthesizers and all these clean parts and all this extra space, the bandwidth in the Pro Tools is, you only have this much waveform. So when you're filling it all up, you don't have any headroom to put this extra stuff in. So that's why we tried to make deliberately, we tried to streamline the riffing a little, um, to make more room in the headspace for the synths and acoustics and percussive instruments and clean vocals and all this stuff, which takes up a lot of the stereo imaging. Whereas on Hidden History, we were trying to compact all of that, as make everything as dense and technically intricate as possible, to leave no breathing room and no space, which I think is part of the charm of the album, is that it's like it's running on all cylinders, and it's like mowing over you, and it's so tight. It's like stopping on a dime. I do really appreciate it. But then also it can be almost, you get ear fatigue more from listening to a record like that than you do from Starspawn, which is a lot looser and more flowing and more low end and stuff like that. There's a lot more space for the clean guitars to be on top, even though we didn't use a lot of, there's synths on both those records that are missing in the mix, because we basically, most synths take up the same mid-range frequency as a bass or a low-tuned guitar.
Hmm.
So we had to make executive choices in the studio to be like, well, do you want this counterpoint synth melody underneath the guitar solo to come up, or do you want to hear the rhythm guitar and the bass that are doing it underneath? So a lot of that stuff gets kind of pushed to the side during the mixing process. But on Absolute Elsewhere, I don't think we did. As far as like, I think each album has its own charm, which is another thing I appreciate about bands. Like, we don't want to make the same one twice, and
Yeah.
we don't feel, you know, like I said, if everyone wants to listen to just one of them out of the three, that's totally fine. But there's a fourth one coming, so it's
Yeah.
always gonna be something a little bit different and a little interesting, at least for us, because we're always just trying to push it.
As far as the next BI album, do y'all plan on recording again in Berlin?
I don't think so. I mean, that was very fun, and I absolutely would record there again. It was incredible. But I think simply for the sake of us having already done that, it would be kind of silly for us to do that. I do know we'll very likely go with Arthur again. He did Luminescent Bridge and Absolute Elsewhere, and he's our boy. And so we'll probably go. I mean, he has a studio. That's where Spectral Voice and Wayfarer have both recorded. I don't think Bi would go there, but we might go someplace else with him.
Yeah.
Some other crazy studio. Also, by the time we get to that, we're always upgrading our own studio, and so maybe it would be easier if you came and just recorded it in our space. The advantage of doing something like we did in Berlin is that you're completely removed from your home environment. You have
Yeah.
no daily life residue, nothing. So you're only there for the task at hand, which is extremely motivating. And we did that for Absolute Elsewhere. We did that for Spectral Voice, Sporagmos. Wayfarer did that for, I think, the last two records. And so we'll definitely do a destination recording, just not sure exactly where.
Yeah. And before I let you go, Paul, I mean, I could sit here and talk to you for another 2.5 hours.
Unfortunately, I will yabber all day, so you got to stop me.
But I mean, I know you've it's been documented that you've worked as a teenager in a record store, and obviously you have a
Not
vast
even a
amount.
teenager. I got a job there in 2012, so I was 25. So I worked there for 5 years when I was
Okay.
25 to about 30.
That's crazy, man. And so you have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to everything records and music, and that's something that I myself, I love music. Obviously, that's why I have a podcast. But I had a lot of friends that always come to me and like, Mo, what's a recommendation for whatever genre? But one thing that I never went head first in is like the ambient side of music, and like you name drop Kraftwerk and Brian Eno and things like that. And what I like to do in a podcast is like, I like to get 6 albums from you as far as the more of the metal side, and 6 albums maybe of what you consider some of the most important records that's ambient.
Okay. Well, I guess I could say, I mean, for the 6 metal records, I gotta do. I know I'm wearing the shirt, so it's corny, but Skin or Hypertrace first album. German power metal, speed metal, heavy metal, 1988, recorded by Frank Bornemann from Eloy in Eloy's studio, Horus Sound in Hanover, Germany. Um, a particular note for that recording is that Running Wild and I think the first two Running Wild and the first three Halloween, maybe even Faith's Warning, were all recorded in Horus Sound at the same time period, this like 87 to 90 time period. And Frank only produced one of those, which happened to be the Scanner record, which is a record I discovered on tour on the last European tour in Gothenburg. There was a record store below the venue, and I was just digging through the bins, and I saw this insane album cover. I was like, "What is this?"
Yeah.
On the back cover, I was like, there's a picture of them that looks straight up out of Eloy's 1988 comeback album Raw, which is not necessarily their best record, but certainly kind of an unknown one. Every song sounds a little different. There's like a Peter Gabriel song, there's a Scorpions song, there's like really huge gated drums. But Frank plays all the synths on this Scanner record. And so there's like sci-fi space sounds everywhere and then ripping guitars. And you could tell that he really loved the concept of the music because it has a really lush, warm production versus some of these other records in the same studio at the same time are a lot tighter and a lot drier. Which they were also produced by different guys, but you could hear Frank's investment, like emotional investment in his music. But I have to recommend Scanner's first album, Hypertrace, 1988, to people. I have also recently, just the other day, my wife gave me the vinyl copy because I've been listening to the CD incessantly on tour. But Bathory's Twilight of the Gods.
Oh
I
yeah,
had
man.
never heard this album before because I heard Octagon once when I was in high school, and so I vowed to never listen to 90s Bathory ever again in my life. And so I got Twilight of the Gods also on this last tour, just on CD. It was like an old pressing with no website, no barcode. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll give it a shot. I had no idea what this record was going to sound. I love Hammerheart, by the way, and so this is like a doomy, like classical version of an opera for Hammerheart or something. And these pretty strange vocals and the harmonized screaming yelling that almost sounds like Nirvana, all these acoustic guitars. There's like almost, it sounds to me like Manowar Triumph of Steel, like the production, the drum value, the
Yeah,
drum
yeah.
and all this stuff. And these long extended interludes, and it's really cinematic, ambitious thing. I had no idea. And so I've been really listening to it quite obsessively the past couple of weeks, just because the ambition and the scope of the project is so inspiring. Even if some of the parts I'm like, man, maybe these vocals sound like your drunk uncle or something next door. But the music is crazy ambitious, and like the production is immense. It's like a spectacle of sound. It's like watching a play or something. And so I've been listening to Twilight of the Gods, which, if like me, you had avoided during your life, I would tell your your listeners to check it out. It's a fascinating album, full of some amazing moments and also some entertaining ones. But let's see some other metal. I have honestly been mostly transfixed with. I just finished up a bunch of mixing stuff, so I've been almost exclusively listening to stuff I'm working on for the past weeks. Trying to clear my
Yeah,
head.
yeah.
Um, but I did recently get Pink Floyd Live at Pompeii, the Steven Wilson remaster.
Such a great album.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I've had the DVD and a bootleg record of it for a long time. But Håkan, the Emperor's manager, tour manager, and like Enslaved and Immortal and stuff, he we met last year when Emperor played here, and so he actually picked me up the Japanese pressing of the Blu-ray CD and with the bonus disc, and also the vinyl from Tower Records in Japan when it came
That's
out.
fucking nice of him.
Yeah, very nice guy. Shout out to Håkan.
I met him in Oakland. He's a great dude.
He's a great guy, and so I've been listening to that, and also just thinking about Steven Wilson. Like, for a guy like Steven Wilson to be like, okay, can you remix Live at Pompeii? That'd be like if they were like, hey, Paul, do you want to play guitar on this Morbid Angel record? Like, it's like he did it, like
Yeah.
he that's the most prog 70s guy thing you could possibly do, is do the first official pressing, remastering, remixing of Live at Pompeii, which does sound pretty fucking incredible. I've been listening to that the last couple of weeks, and I've honestly been listening to it more analytically than just enjoying it as a listener, because I'm just trying to study the differences in the mix and where things are placed, and try to understand that, um, which is a triumph, as it was in 1972, as it again today. Like what an incredible record. Um, Also, finally got into 90s King Diamond recently. I can recommend this as well, where I listened to three King Diamond records. I thought I knew all of it or whatever, but turns out that the Eye is a masterpiece, and so is Conspiracy. I think
Mhm.
Conspiracy was actually earlier, but if I recently got the Eye and was just like, yeah, why not? Just let's find out. And that shit has been really inspiring me. And also, speaking of something I was very late to the game with, is that I've been Opeth curious for the past year,
Yeah.
and all the BI guys are mad Opeth stands, and so was this band Velnius that I moved to Colorado to join. That was their favorite band, and that's where I met Jeff, who now plays in Spectral and BI. And so I had bought, in high school, if you liked Opeth, I didn't want to be friends with you, but when I moved to Colorado, I had to join this band whose favorite band was Opeth. So as a good guitar player, I did my research, and I just I bought the first maybe two records or so for first record. And yeah, I just tried to do it analytically. I actually met Peter Lindgren in Stockholm on this last tour, and he was telling me that he had heard in the, like, everyone's like, oh, you gotta listen to this band or whatever, and it's like progressive death metal. And it's like, if you're the Opeth guy, you don't want to hear a fucking progressive death metal record from 2024. I understand, but he finally listened to it, and he was telling me that he noticed that, unlike almost all these bands that kind of worship Opeth, that there was something that very noticeably missing in BI's music. Like there's like maybe prog metal parts online with what Opeth is trying to do, but there's not like that Opethness inside of it, even though
Yeah.
obviously Jeff and Morris and Isaac totally love this stuff. So, and I had seen Opeth in 2012 when I joined Velnius as like market research. I was trying to understand why these guys wanted to go, well, or so into this band. And I even told Peter that I saw myself as a Peter Lindgren, where I was like, as soon as we stop trying to write songs over each other, then you get really powerful, because I was trying to make myself in service to the other guitar player, the songwriter, because I joined a power trio. And so I was like, I'm just gonna do what's best for the song and try to think like, what would Peter Lindgren do, even without being an Opeth guy. And so he thought that was kind of funny. But uh, later, maybe 2 years ago, so this is now 10 years after I bought my first Opeth CD and didn't really like it, I got. Do you know the artist Justin Bartlett? He was uber cult. He died a couple of years ago. He did like Moss and Sun and Dragged into Sunlight and Locrian, like this really kind of stick and poke looking stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he died, and he was living in San Diego at the time, where my wife's friend runs a record store called Reanimated, and we always go out there. And when Justin was offloading a lot of his stuff, there's all these bins out there, and we'd go visit Nick when we're out visiting Erica's mom down in San Diego, and we go to the record store. And I'd be like, dude, what is all this? All these like Century Black and like Old Candlelight, like all this old stuff. I was like, what is all this stuff? And he's like, that was Justin's, man. And I was like, oh shit. So I got a lot of it just for post, because I grew up looking at his art being like, that's so cool. And he was actually the first famous person I ever saw wear a Blood Incantation shirt, because he
Oh,
wore
hell yes.
he wore an Interdimensional Extinction shirt to a Rockies game. And like 10 years ago, I took this picture of him there because he was in Colorado, and I was like, holy shit. That's the guy who did the Moss poster that's all fucked up looking. But anyway, so I bought a lot of stuff just because I had, emotional connection. Like I bought maybe records that he already had, or that I already had, that he had like the old pressing of or something. I was like, oh, that's cool. Then I just want to preserve his collection or something. But in this collection was a lot of stuff that I was like, really? You're into that? Because he had a pretty great musical taste, And so there was all these Opeth CDs, and I was like, what the fuck? Okay, well, I'll try the oldest one. I get My Arms Your Hearse, that was Justin's, and I start getting a little more into it, and I'm like, okay, I kind of understand, but it's still not clicking for me. And then the guys, I listen to an Opeth record every tour. Those guys are playing it in the van every tour since like 10 years, and so did Velnius before that. And so, maybe not on Spectre Voice tour, because Eli was also not an Opeth guy, but every BI tour, I'm hearing multiple Opeth albums trying to understand it. But then finally, Isaac is, you know, I'm asking the guys, like when I'm at the record store, I'm like, is this a good one? And they're like, oh, I don't know if you're gonna like that one, but maybe you should try this other one. So then I'm just getting, by now I have like fucking 5 Opeth CDs and I'm still trying to figure this out. And I even have an OG of My Arms Rehearse on vinyl because I got a really good deal on it. And I was like, maybe this will help me understand if it's like a rare pressing or something. But it was like $35 or whatever. It's like $100 record. But anyway, um, finally, 3 or 4 albums in last year, maybe even earlier this year, I don't remember, or maybe late last year, but I get Deliverance, which is Isaac's favorite.
That's
And
my favorite too.
so, and I think for me now, is also mine. That was the one that really hit me. There's like this like total Morbid Angel riffs. The guitar tone is super dry. There's a really solemn atmosphere in the production. Really amazing. Obviously, the title track is incredible. They're still playing it, and I was like, this is. I'm finally starting to understand this, right? And so then we go see them on the new tour. Their album comes out around the same time as ours. We go see them in Denver. It's extremely impressive. It's a total master class showmanship, professionalism, sound. It was just incredible. I was blown away. And I recognized many of the songs because I was like, okay, I've been listening to a couple of 4 of these CDs now. I'm starting to get the Opeth thing. Obviously, they play Deliverance last and stuff like that. So it's like very cool. We also went record shopping with them, which was a huge, that's going to ingratiate us to each other quite a bit. But it was very cool. And I still was only curious, I have to say. And so then I'm getting the other ones. Well, on the first Absolute Else tour, I got like Blackwater Park and Morning Rise, which I think is probably my second because the production, the acoustic guitars with the fretless bass, this is incredible sound on Morning Rise. This is a crazy record. But finally, the point of this story, and it gets back to Justin Bartlett a year or two later because we went back to Reanimated earlier this year and got some more, and it's just that's the last batches of it, and it's the Opeth live at the Royal Albert Hall 4 or 5 disc, like 3 CD 2 DVD thing. Have you seen this?
I have not. This is news to me.
Dude, I this convinced me 100%. This is my recommendation, even though everyone
Okay.
else in the world likes Opeth. This live at the Royal Albert Hall blew my mind. It is like everybody in the band. It's recorded in like 2008 or 10. Everyone's firing on all cylinders. The sound is incredible. The lights are incredible. The venue, this historic place, the atmosphere is so insane. And it's 3 discs because their songs are super long. And the first
Yeah.
disc is all of Blackwater Park in full. And then the second discs are 1 or 2 songs from every album up to that point. So I guess
Damn.
that would have been Watershed, I think is maybe the last one, or maybe Heritage by then. But it's insane, my friend. It is absolutely like to anybody curious or who doesn't believe the power and importance of that band, I was completely
Oh,
my
let me
mind. I was
let
like,
me
holy mackerel, dude. Like it is so. And then the bonus disc, there's a DVD of them on tour at the time, which is kind of humbling and fun to watch. And then there's an interview with Michael where he's answering questions that were sent out in advance of them making this live DVD. All the fans from the Opeth website, they could like submit their questions, and they chose like the 30 or 50 best questions or whatever for him to answer in an informal interview, which was also quite humorous and enlightening at times. But this is amazing. This is a crazy album, and
I figured out real quick just how epic sounding that band is because I had no idea who they were in 2003, and I'm a Marine, and I was activated during 2003's Operational Iraqi Freedom. Ended up getting hurt. Long story short, friend and I rented a car. We drove from San Diego from Camp Pendleton up to LA for Danzig's Blackest of the Black tour in
okay.
Anaheim, and having no idea about Opeth. I mean, they played, I want to say, third to last and just fucking blew the doors. I mean, every American who didn't know about Opeth knew about them then. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's an incredible band. So I finally have transitioned from being a denier to curious to being a full on stan. I total support to these guys. This is one of the best bands. But the only other metal that I've really been listening to lately, is not quite metal exactly either. It's another record my wife gave me, but Frank Marino's debut, Juggernaut, 1982. You heard this
Okay.
record? This is an incredible album. The If you put this on, if you have like a job to do, your job's going to get done if you're listening to Frank Marino Juggernaut in the background. Like whether you're driving or building something or breaking something down or working out or whatever, like you put this on and you're gonna get the job done. And it's got crazy heavy Moog bass, like ripping creamy guitar. Like it's just incredible. Great melodies, great songs. It's one of her favorite guitar players, and I actually got that record when we were record shopping with Opeth. I got it for her. I texted her. I was like, "Do you have this one?" And she's like, "No, I don't actually." So, and then Michael sees it. It's like, "Oh, Frank Marino," and I was just like, "Yeah, it's for my wife." And he's like, "Your wife was very cool." And then I brought it home. We were listening to it, and it was like, damn, this record kills. Like, so I had to go get a copy. It's like a $6 record. You can get it at any record store. But yeah, Frank Marino Juggernaut, 10 out of 10. So
Sweet, man. And I gotta get a couple just recommendations from you because I mean, uh, your ambient and the synthesizer and all that, like, I guess what is the your like the golden egg of sorts of like albums that you kind of just go back to and listen to, like man, this is like an important record for me as an artist who records, ambient music.
well, I mean the cheapest answers, which I would probably have to say in relation to anybody listening, may be curious about BI. I mean, uh, the Tangerine Dreams third album, or maybe your third album, Zeit. It's a double album from 1971 or two. This is like easily the darkest drone album. It like prefigured the concept of dark ambient and drone um, back in the early 70s, and it's double LP, 20-minute sides, just extremely lethargic, minimal space, like almost harrowing, reversed strings and all this really cool stuff. One of the first recordings in Germany to use a Moog synthesizer. It was actually Florian Frick from Popol Vuh's modular system that he later sold to Klaus Schultz. But he's playing guest Moog on that Tangerine Dream album, which is kind of a cool curiosity. But if anybody was to listen to Sight, you would understand exactly where Time Wave Zero came from. And I also, in my solo music, I'm always trying to get back to that particular level of stillness and like empty, kind of void ridden luminosity, as it were. And Zeit has that in spades. So there's nothing really going on in it, but it will suck you into a black hole, which, when you consider this was recorded over 50 years ago, it's really incredible.
Yeah.
At the same time, Enya is actually probably one of the things I listen to the most, as far as finding a comfort in stress times, but also seeking inspiration for new configurations of melodies and harmonies and stuff. Enya is an absolute master of atmosphere and harmony, and using predominantly multi-tracking. Like most of it is like the DX7, and then there's like a couple other synths, but most of these things that are these huge lush soundscapes, it's like hundreds of tracks with like 100 vocal tracks on top of like 70 tracks from one synth, all stacked up to make these orchestral sounds. It's really incredible. In particular, her first two albums. The first one was actually the soundtrack to The Celts, the BBC documentary series. That was She was still the member of her family band, Clannad, the Irish folk band, who incidentally also recorded an album with Connie Plank. But when she was still in Clannad, they were like the producer of their Clannad family band records. This guy Nicky Ryan was also doing the stuff in the studio. Was like, hey, you want to make some? We have some extra tape, and we need like some soundscapey stuff for this documentary series about the Celts. And so they did that, and it was like an almost anonymous thing where, by the time all the mail came in for this documentary series, 90% of it was asking for, what's this music? What is this music? So then they re-released it, and they retconned it as her debut album, which is just self-titled, her on the cover with the wolves. That's a masterpiece album. But also Watermark, the album that has Orinoco Flow on it. Everyone knows Sail Away, but this is an incredible album. And if you have somehow, by the chance of oversaturation from the airwaves, from hearing Orinoco Flow and stuff like that everywhere at the grocery store and on Christmas season, you have to still listen to the rest of Watermark. This is an absolute incredible masterclass, elite tier level recording. And when you consider that there's like two musicians on this album, the soundscapes are spellbinding. It is absolutely insane that she did this. Another absolute master that is pretty critical to both mine and Blood Incantation DNA, Brian Eno, the kind of the godfather of ambient. He coined the term, at least in relation to environmental music, which doesn't need to be listened to and can be ignored and stuff like that. Brian Eno is a huge inspiration. I want to have a cat named Brian Eno someday. You could call him Mr. Eno. You could call him Brian Eno, but you couldn't call my cat Brian. His name would not be Brian. You call
Right,
him,
right. Of
Brian.
course.
But I love Brian Eno, and very fascinating guy. Still relevant, putting out cool records like the ones from 2 or 4 years ago are still interesting. His apps are very interesting. I've actually used them to make music myself. A fascinating guy, and I still haven't seen the documentary actually, but the Brian Eno album that I would recommend to anybody listening would probably be Ambient 4 on Land. This is one of his darkest ones, and in particular for me, like this is the type of music. It's like nocturnal, spacious, very swampy. It's got a lot of field recordings, environmental feeling where you feel like you're in an environment outside. You're not like listening to a guy playing synths at you in a studio. You're in this kind of spacious and airy environment. Very, very good. But another one, I'm going to do 6. I think because I have to mention 2 different ones. The other one is another ambient mastermind who is now a personal friend of ours after decades of inspiring me, Mr. Steve Roach. He played the Absolute Elsewhere album release show in Boulder last year, and he played with us in Tucson on the first Absolute Else tour, and he just played with us on the last show of the most recent Absolute Else tour in LA at the Wiltern with Krylis and Cynic. And Steve Roach is another absolute master, one of the first guys in America in the late 70s to start playing predominantly synthesizer music, as was taking over Europe and stuff with people like Klaus Schultz and Tangerine Dream and Jean-Michel Jarre and all these guys out there. Steve was one of the first people to do that here. And he's still doing it, still putting out great records, still playing interesting music. And I guess if I had to recommend one of his, I'm kind of torn because his most classic album is called Structure Some Silence. And I went and actually saw him in Portland for my birthday last year. He's doing an anniversary, 40th anniversary tour of it in a church. It was pretty incredible. And that's like the classic one.
Mhm.
His darkest one is called The Magnificent Void. That's pretty fucking spooky. Put that on, and that's like an evil planetarium soundtrack. But I kind of want to rep the live in Boulder, Colorado. I think it's called Spirals and Portals or something. He just did another one called Portals and Spirals, so he's like reversing them because the CD, the one that just came out, is I think Portals and Spirals, and that's drawn from a lot of the loops that he was making for this show that he played on the Absolute Else tour 2 times, and then also just now on the other one, and for the album release show. And so that one, live in Boulder 2024, he released on his own label, Time Room Recordings, Time Room Editions. And this is a fascinating record for people to listen to, I think, because one, it's an ambient guy opening an hour-long set for Absolute Elsewhere's album release show, which happened to also be our very first show in Boulder ever, despite forming there 15 years ago. I had actually never played a show in Boulder, even when I moved to join a band who lived in Boulder. And Isaac is from Boulder, and so it meant a lot for him to be there as well, and for us to be there. It was a whole thing. A lot of friends and family from all over were there. It was a big deal. But Steve's set was a sort of truncated version of the 2 or 3 hour set that I saw him do in the chapel, which ended in the last track, the title track from Structure Some Silence.
Mm-hmm.
This one, he took all those other little small pieces in the middle of this 2 hour set and compacted them down into like a 45-minute or hour long set. And he had never played a metal show before. He's an icon of electronic music and ambient and trance and stuff like that. World music. He lived in Australia. He lives in AZ now, but he's from California. Like the guy's a cool guy. And this show was his first playing for a metal audience, and also not just a metal audience, but a Blood Incantation audience, which is already kind of a different combination of people. And the audio recording, which Arthur Rizek, the guy who recorded and produced Absolute Elsewhere, he did sound for both us and Steve at this show, and he recorded it. And so this recording captures the guy who recorded the one album that this other guy is opening for the album release show of, with his album, which is now a new album that's just come out. And all these things are kind of converging over this one night on October 4th, 2024, up in Boulder. And, it was just so special, and the crowd is going crazy, and you can hear it on the recording. You can hear people egging him on, because it's really quiet music. There's a lot of
Yeah.
empty space, and there's percussion and kind of tribal sounding stuff, and he uses acoustic instruments, and he like lights. When I saw him in the church, because it's all stone, he like lit the end of the didgeridoo on fire, so he's going like wow, wow, when the shoots are playing out the didgeridoo. Is pretty badass.
Dude,
But
that's
he
yeah.
did do that at the Boulder Theater because of the carpet and the curtains and stuff. But he's doing that, and he's you know being egged on by the crowd in a good way, where like before this part is even done, people are screaming over the mic, so you can hear it in the room. And so there's this really tangible goosebumpy energy throughout this live in Boulder Steve Roach recording, which I think gives people a really great mix of the type of styles that he brings to the table, and also why we chose to work with him, and we're going to do something together in the studio at some point. And that's a really great one. But the other thing I want to recommend is an album called Cluster and Eno, and it's by these two guys, Hans Joachim Rodelius and Dieter Mobius, who used to be in the band Cluster with a K, which was founded by Konrad Schnitzler. And Konrad Schnitzler, some people might recognize the name of as who made the intro Sylvester Anfang from Death Crush, Mayhem's first record.
Mhm.
And so Euronymous literally camped outside of Conrad's house for like 2 days, being like, "Please give me anything." And he eventually threw him a tape, and that's what the intro, the dun 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 dun, that is this guy. So the other two guys in this band, Cluster with a K, when Conrad becomes the main guy, the other two guys go become Cluster with a C. They go out and they live on a farm in the middle of nowhere. They leave Berlin, and they get a this ancient, like I think it was built in the 1700s, big ass farmhouse, and it's falling apart, yada yada. They build their studio out there, and while they're out there, the guitar player from Neu, Michael Rother, Neu breaks up in Dusseldorf and comes over and hangs out with these guys in Forst, in this small town in Bavaria, and they record an album called Music von Harmonia, which is an incredible album. It almost prefigures electronic pop music and techno at the same time, all the way back in 1974. Anyway, Brian Eno hears this record, and in the NME 1975 or whatever, says the most important pop band in the world is Harmonia. Brian Eno goes to Forst, Germany, brings his tapes and some instruments, and hangs out with these guys in this forest, in this little encampment for 6 weeks or something, and they record everything. And half of the sessions didn't come out until the 90s, and they were released as Harmonia and Eno, called Tracks and Traces, or Harmonia 94. But the first one that did finally come out at the time was called Cluster and Eno. And this is a record that I would listen to every morning when I opened the record store, every morning without fail. I listen to it when it rains and I'm driving on tour. I listen to it when I'm trying to sleep on a boat. It is a mixture of ambient pieces and small electronic songs with rhythm, sometimes guitars and percussion, and almost like a farm-like kind of pastoral atmosphere. Really interesting. Lots of field recordings. You can hear like the chair creaking when they're recording the piano. You can hear cows outside in the field. It's a very interesting recording. But I would highly recommend it. I know it was a bit of a tangent to get there, but why? But you can see it's connected to both Mayhem and Brian Eno and all these
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
It's all there. The Cluster and Eno album, it connects everything like that.
That's
So
that's 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 amazing, man. That's the first time I've ever heard of that part of the history behind it.
yeah, love
Because
stuff
I
like
mean, I've been in tunnel vision since like 1995, I'd say, aging myself. But yeah, I mean, got on the black metal train, never looked back. Still continue to move forward with that. But the dad's, like I said, I've got developed a taste of my own, like we all do, and I really appreciate everything that y'all put into BI's music, and even more so with the stuff that you're releasing out on your own, because I think it's a breath of fresh air knowing that there's people who like everything edgy, hard, metal, like metal like, but also could have room to like incorporate other music like you
Yeah,
do.
I mean,
So
I like I said, I used to be that guy, man. I was anybody who thinks they got a problem with me. I was an even crazier hater back in the day. You have no idea. And I still run into people whose bridges I burnt back then, like I said. But I was fortunate enough to grow out of it. I was kind of forced to, but again, some people don't have that luxury, and so I appreciate being able to grow out of my own naivete in so many ways. And like I said earlier, I've only recently discovered that I even have the ability to make music that affects people besides myself. And so I feel motivated to make music to help other people in addition to music that I think sounds cool, but now I have other people's emotional state in my mind, in my scopes when I'm working on stuff. And it's no longer just for the self-indulgence of what my ears like, which that's what I made all my records, all the riffs I ever wrote was just because I was like, this is sick and that's what I want to hear. But I think I've gotten the most mileage out of stuff that I didn't approach it that way, where I approached it with having other people's not like making it for them or to make them pleased with it, but to be cognizant of its impact on them and to not make something like I would never make music I didn't like just because other people did. Not to
yeah,
say it like
yeah,
that. I'm just saying, like, when I tried to make music that healed myself, I failed. But when I tried to make music that was me processing my own healing and hopefully trying to benefit other people, that's the music people write to me the most about, trying to say, man, thanks for that one. And when we applied that methodology to Blood Incantation, look what's happened to what's absolute elsewhere.
yep. And you were sitting here. I had no idea that you spent time in Twin Falls, Idaho. I just drove through there.
Oh yeah,
I went on an epic road trip with Ben Falgu of Goat Whore and Soylent Green.
nice.
He's a good friend of mine, and
That's a long way from New Orleans.
oh yeah. He moved out there for about I think 2 years now. He's been out
Crazy.
there, and he wanted to bring back their tour van. And we also did like a Louisiana crawfish ball when we got to his house, and so I had all the equipment, the boiling pots, and all that good shit. So we did a traditional Cajun crawfish ball out there, and all along the way, man, I never had a road trip like that. And I got culture a little bit. We stopped in Twin Falls, and I saw the gorge, and
That's so
just
funny. It's so
it.
funny. Back in the '90s, we would light bowling balls on fire and throw them on people. And that's what we did to stay entertained. Back then, it was a lot smaller town. I think it's a proper city now, but when I moved there in '91, I think it was like 20,000, 22,000 people, 18,000 people. It was nothing going on, and
Yeah,
there was like two kids in my middle school that had a black shirt. You know, so there was like there was the Sublime guy, the drug dealing Sublime guy, and then there was like the goth dude who showed me like Ozzy Osbourne and Metallica Orion and stuff like that.
yeah, and how important those people were to you. Looking back.
Yeah, I think about it all the time. I really
Yeah,
do. I mean, the first time I ever left town when I wasn't supposed to, and my parents didn't know, I like left the town I was in to go with some guy because he was buying weed. I wasn't. I had never even smoked weed. I was just, we were skating and having fun. And he's like, I got to go do this. Let's go, and we'll be right back. And we're sitting in this house. I'm terrified. I'm probably 12 or 13, and out of nowhere this music starts playing and it's coming and creeping in, and I'm like, this is like scary, what is this? And it's fucking it's Orion. It's just like still my favorite Metallica song ever. We actually BI would cover it, but we don't want to get sued. So but that's like one of the greatest songs of all time. And then
I,
immediately after um Orion, the the at the time the new Ozzy album Osmosis was like a 2 years old or something, and
mhm.
so that I Just Want You song came on, and I was like, this guy's voice is like so scary, like this is so crazy, and yeah, I think about that instant instant, I suppose. But all the time I think about it, and I'm just like the guy was buying the weed. His name was Luis, and he had like an eyebrow piercing and a goatee. I thought he was like the coolest guy in the world, you know. And yeah, he took me out of town to go buy weed from some guy, and then now I'm in a metal band. So
Yeah, I have a very similar, experience, man. Whenever I was, like, 10 years old back in 1990, had no idea who Venom or Slayer was,
yeah,
and, there was this guy who lived, like, across town in my hometown. His name was Jason, and Jason, him and his little brother and his dad lived in this, like, Silver Bullet RV, and,
yeah,
like, they would always be outside having cookouts and just flaming their food, on a grill, and he's playing fucking Venom, and it's the first time I ever heard Slayer. It was Seasons in the no, it was Rain and Blood,
oh
and I
yeah,
was like, "Who the fuck is this, Jason?" He was like, "This is Slayer, bro.
dude,
You're
and
not ready for this." Like Jason was 15, I'm 10 years old. I'm like, I need to
yeah, give me
do
the more
more
of
of
that.
this.
I need more of that. Yeah, man. It's small moments like that's why everything matters. That's why everybody's important, you know. And you never know what stories yet to unfold based on a weird spontaneous interaction with stuff like that, you know, and where life can unfurl from seemingly random and chaotic events. Eventually stuff starts to gel and we all get where we're supposed to go at some point.
Is
Maybe
that
not this life, but perhaps the next time around. There's plenty of time in the timeless now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Paul, I'm definitely gonna hit you up, man. Come December, because I actually went to Inferno. I go to Inferno Festival like every year since 2022,
Oh hell yeah.
and I was actually getting tattooed the time Blood Incantation was playing. Sadly, to admit
Oh,
that.
that was a pretty good one, I will say. I mean, that was pretty chaotic. I guess they didn't read our stage plot because there was just some other drum on a different drum riser in the middle of where the guitar cabs are supposed to go, and they're like, "Okay, you guys are good to go." And we're like, this is pretty." Luckily, there was a fucking curtain, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was pretty chaotic up there with like 40 people running around carrying one thing at a time. But I do think we played pretty well. So, but we'll be back. I mean, I know we're playing. I know we're playing in Norway next summer. So we'll be there.
Well,
Not for
I'm gonna catch you before then. I'm gonna go to the show in Colorado in December. I believe y'all.
oh, the decibel thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
that'll be cool. That'll be good. So, all right. Well, I'll see you there.
absolutely, man, dude. Hey, thank you so much for having a chat with me, and I
Hey,
can't
no
thank you enough.
problem, man. Thanks. Sorry about all the rambling. I'm just, I got a lot of thoughts zipping around in my tiny brain.
Don't even worry about it. I thoroughly enjoy it, man. I consider you like you're one of the most well thought, well read persons that I've ever met in my life. So
So,
it was good to hear your thoughts on all matters that we discuss. So
well,
I
thanks,
mean,
man, for
I don't
listening.
think I had to ask. I mean, I might have asked maybe 3 or 4 questions at most.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the right. Maybe I should be more quiet, but next time.
Nah, man, it's all good. It's all good.
All right, man. Well, I'll talk to you later, Mo. Thanks
Yes,
to
sir, bro.
everybody else out there who happens to be listening as well.
Absolutely, man. You have a good one.
You too, man.